Right in the middle of the majestic mountain peaks, a powerful and destructive explosion occurred that shook the entire area. The blast wave rolled through the massive stone building, destroying its ancient walls and foundation. Amidst the clouds of smoke and tongues of flame, one could make out the silhouette of a man with a fiery hell raging behind him. The stranger loudly announced that many long-awaited guests had arrived for this important meeting. At that very moment, he was staring at the majestic building that towered right in front of him. Indeed, an incredibly large number of people gathered in the square, filling all the available space around. Suddenly, someone from the crowd began to loudly shout appeals to the powerful demonic cult. An unknown man was screaming at the top of his lungs, attracting the attention of every passerby with his cries. He persistently asked those gathered how they would be able to get out of this hopeless situation. Chanam's sect, nicknamed the Steadfast Sword Domin, solemnly declared that now not only the 9 great cults had united as one. In his opinion, the idiots from the demonic cult must definitely suffer severe punishment for their immeasurable arrogance. According to ancient prophecies, it is they who will open the gates to the other world for their dark forces. Those gathered should also not forget about those who contain the sacred reincarnation of the heavenly demon. We are talking about the future leader of a powerful demonic cult who will soon show his power. The name of this chosen warrior was Gunshin, and it inspired fear in many. He vowed to put an end to all the evil deeds that the enemies had committed in recent times. The young guy had absolutely no idea what this strange man was talking about. Everyone present seemed to have fallen into some kind of collective insanity, and this irritated him incredibly. The angry young man contemptuously called everyone gathered decrepit and worthless old men with no future. Today he was determined to simply finish off each of these annoying opponents with his own hands. Everyone present began to seriously worry about their lives at that critical moment. The gray-bearded man proudly declared that the young warrior was too arrogant. The angry guy sharply told his opponent to shut his mouth and boldly walk towards him. The elderly man, overcome with rage, began to wave his combat weapon threateningly over his head. The confident guy spoke loudly so that everyone gathered would listen carefully to his important words. In his opinion, they should immediately finish off all these pathetic dogs without exception, especially those enemies who are completely unaware of their true place in this world. An intense battle between the opposing forces began at that very critical moment. The mighty demonic warrior fought fiercely against his numerous opponents, sparing no effort. Suddenly, in the midst of the battle, a mysterious stranger appeared on the battlefield. Immediately after his appearance, he suddenly disappeared and began to operate from the shadows. The enemy's eyes immediately began to rapidly turn white, as if life was leaving his body. The reincarnation of the heavenly demon moved at incredible speed, astonishing everyone with its agility and skill. Everyone present was extremely puzzled by what was happening, but it was in that tense moment that something changed. The determined guy began to move forward, rapidly preparing for a decisive clash with his enemies. A moment later, he launched a powerful attack aimed at one of the opponents approaching him. At a critical moment, one of the allies loudly said that they should not be afraid of the impending danger. At that very moment, the young man threateningly waved his sharp battle sword. With one precise and deadly blow, he instantly killed the enemy standing right in front of him. After a successful attack, the warrior stopped, abruptly assessing the situation on the battlefield around him. All the witnesses of what was happening began to speak in fear that the great demon had finally descended to earth. No one present had ever told anyone else how terrifying and scary he was. The next moment, the guy quickly attacked one of the remaining surviving opponents. The ruthless warrior continued to methodically attack the enemies one after another, giving them no respite. The invincible guy continued his deadly attack relentlessly against all remaining opponents in the area. He mockingly asked the enemy if he really thought he could kill him with such a pitiful force. I wonder what those cocky idiots were even thinking when they challenged him today. Gunshin, the creator of the demon cult, went into full confrontation with Jianam, but even he would turn into a demon. He admitted that he was the reincarnation of a heavenly demon, but he thought that the enemies would not come unprepared for battle. It was at that critical moment that another mysterious stranger appeared on the battlefield. The reincarnation asked the alien who he was, as she had never seen him before. The mysterious stranger began to slowly approach the enemy at that very tense moment of the battle. The attentive guy stared at the approaching enemy, studying his combat capabilities and intentions. Within a moment of assessing the situation, he began to actively defend himself against the impending threat. The young warrior could not understand whether there was anyone so incredibly strong among these opponents. He rudely called the stranger a bastard and aggressively asked where he even came from. The guy began to persistently ask which school the enemy came from, Shaolin Wudong or Chang'er. The stranger noticed that young people today have no manners at all. When an elder speaks, one must respond. If such manners had been displayed in his native land, the impudent fellow would have been dead long ago. At that critical moment, he looked at his young successor with a careful and appraising eye. Immediately after studying the enemy, he resolutely began to attack him with all available means. The experienced warrior actually managed to land a successful blow on his overconfident opponent in battle. After completing the attack, he deftly jumped back, preparing for the next round of battle. The surprised stranger admitted that it was a truly impressive display of martial skill and technique. Only now did he finally understand what a dangerous opponent he would have to deal with. The enemy confidently declared that the guy would definitely die today since no one could compare to him. Suddenly, the young warrior looked in surprise at something nearby that caught his close attention. What was happening surprised and amazed him so much that he lost his concentration for a moment. The experienced stranger quickly pointed his sharp, deadly weapon straight at the young opponent. The guy didn't even have time to see the enemy move because at that moment a hole formed in his body. After receiving a serious wound, he immediately began to cough up scarlet blood. The wounded warrior said bitterly that apparently he was not given another outcome of the battle from above. Naturally, after such humiliation, he immediately fell into uncontrollable rage and fury. The enraged guy began calling his opponent a bastard and asking why he was constantly barking. The self-confident opponent mockingly said that despite the fact that the enemy's body was pierced through and through, "I wonder if the guy knows how the enemy managed to achieve such a high level of skill in combat." At the next critical moment, someone began to persistently address the wounded warrior from afar. He turned his attention to the two mysterious people on the roof of the neighboring building. Among the observers was an unfamiliar man in dark clothes closely watching the fight. What was happening on the roof immediately interested the curious guy and attracted his full attention. A moment after examining the roof, he slowly turned back to face his opponent. At that very moment, he saw a man fly away quickly straight towards him. After such an unexpected turn of events, he instantly fell into a state of uncontrollable rage. The angry warrior began to shout loudly that all these people were real bastards. He continued to scream very loudly, expressing his immense anger and frustration with what was happening around him. The guy screamed with all his might, putting all the accumulated pain and anger into his voice. After a long scream, he gradually began to lose consciousness from the serious injuries he had received. The dying warrior could not believe that everything could end this way. He sincerely believed that his great story could not end so ingloriously today. But despite all his resistance, the boy still died instantly from his wounds. From his earliest childhood, he carefully prepared for great achievements and future victories. The future warrior trained tirelessly every day, improving his fighting skills. He worked hard to become the strongest fighter of his generation. The determined young man had no real friends who could support him. When he sat alone on the edge of the cliff pondering his fate, the next moment someone suddenly came up from behind and carefully placed a hand on his shoulder. It was the same mysterious man who watched the fight from the roof of the building. The surprised guy slowly turned around and looked closely at the stranger next to him. The man calmly said that the young warrior definitely could not die like this. The guy had absolutely no idea what the strange noise was that was coming from around him. The next moment, some unknown man happily said that he had finally woken up. He swung at the man lying down and sternly told him to get up from the ground immediately. The disoriented guy was very surprised by what was happening around him at the moment. Some mocking guy said that he thought that the one lying down had finally died. Okay, let them stop fainting and get down to the game. Hit him as many times as possible. Gunshin had no idea what kind of disgusting degenerates were surrounding him on all sides. At the critical moment, something began to materialize out of thin air right in front of him. Before his astonished eyes appeared the mission to remove the trash in a limited time of 30 seconds. The reward for successfully completing the task remained unknown, and in case of failure, he faced death. The guy started telling Gunshin to stand exactly like this, but he didn't understand the situation. it was just a dream or something since he would never die at the hands of the bastard. The guy started laughing and saying that he was the first so the loser shouldn't be ashamed of his actions. Gunshin couldn't figure out who these people were, so he decided to attack the enemy with his foot. He said that these idiots were incredibly annoying to him, and a notice appeared to remove one piece of garbage. The amazed guy naturally flew far back after such a powerful and unexpected blow. His astonished friends were very much amazed by what was happening right before their eyes. Gunshin looked at everyone around him intently at that tense moment. It seemed to him that these people had completely lost their minds from what had just happened. Gunshin couldn't understand what was going on around him and what kind of strange thing had appeared in front of him. He seriously didn't understand whether he had completely gone crazy from everything that was happening around him. Gunshin paid close attention to the fact that if he failed the mission he would actually die. He looked closely at the message that appeared in front of him, trying to understand its meaning. Suddenly Gunshin remembered that he had actually died in the previous battle. His alarmed heart began to beat very quickly from the realization of this frightening fact. Then he felt very ill and he instinctively grabbed his aching heart with his hands. The guy didn't understand what was happening to him. Was he really alive? He was informed through the system that his body was possessed by some unknown force. Gunshin had no idea what this strange message was supposed to mean to him at all. It might be a technique wielded by those damned blood cult bastards or something. The guy couldn't understand why these people decided to do such a thing to him. The system reported the first mission and the final reward for successful completion of all tasks. Gunshin wondered with disbelief whether he would really have another chance at life. Pensive Gunshin thought seriously about this whole incredible and strange incident. Everyone around kept shouting that what was happening was definitely not a simple illusion. The unfamiliar place and severe pain in the body serve as irrefutable proof of the reality of what is happening. Damn scroll, he has no idea what this thing did to his physical body. But he will definitely find a way to take revenge on those who caused him so much suffering. Gunshin firmly told those around him to come to him for 1 second to talk. The aggressors immediately flew into an uncontrollable rage and asked if he wanted to die right there. One of the guys came very close to the standing Gunshin to attack. Gunshin was genuinely surprised by how incredibly slow and clumsy his opponent's movements were. After this observation, Gunshin simply attacked the clumsy enemy in a split second with ease. Naturally, the second guy flew just as far away from the powerful blow of the experienced fighter. The third guy decided to act in exactly the same self-confident and stupid way. Gunshin finally realized that if he thought about it, he was incredibly irritated by situations like this with idiots. He is especially annoyed by arrogant idiots like these guys who don't know their place. They have the audacity to order him, a great warrior, what he should do. I wonder if this fool really wants to die right here and right now. Let him wait a little. Gunshin will definitely kill him with his own trained hands without any outside help. Gunshin said with satisfaction that there was only one last enemy left to deal with. But he noticed with surprise that the last cowardly guy had quickly run away somewhere. Disappointed, Gunshin loudly asked where the last coward had run away from him so quickly. The guy who had been sitting at the desk all this time said at that moment that the enemy had escaped. Gunshin began to scratch his head, as he didn't understand why the time to complete the task was running out. Suddenly Gunshin realized that his end had come for good if he did not complete the mission. He had only 5 critical seconds left to complete the task at hand. At this very time, important events were taking place in the long school corridor. The last frightened guy began to quickly run away from the enraged Gunshin down the corridor. He said loudly that Gunshin was a complete dumb idiot and that Dango would definitely kill him. How dare this bastard even get involved with influential people like them? At the critical moment, there were 2 seconds left and Gunshin suddenly appeared right behind the fleeing man. Gunshin concentrated and prepared to deliver the decisive fatal blow to his opponent. There was only 1 second left and he resolutely took action without delay. Gunshin mockingly asked his opponent how far he intended to run away from just retribution. Immediately after these words, he successfully dealt with the last piece of trash from the assigned task. Gunshin hit the enemy so hard that he made a deep hole inside the solid stone wall. He exhaled heavily and said with relief that it was very close, but the mission was completed. The next moment, a worried girl ran up to him and began to address Gajin. She asked with concern if the victim in this situation was completely okay. Gunshin couldn't understand at all who this girl was and what she wanted from him. She started saying that it seemed like this cheeky guy had been bullying him for long enough. He had been avoiding her company lately because of his adolescence, but she shouldn't avoid him. Gunshin thought seriously about the meaning of her mysterious and incomprehensible words. She then turned her attention to his injured arm and asked worriedly what was wrong. Gunshin began to explain to her in detail the whole situation that happened to him today. Gunshin didn't know whether he should tell him that he knocked the guy out with his own hands. She grabbed a lying stone and began to angrily say that this guy was a very bad child. The frightened guy quickly told those around him that he was not at all to blame for what happened. Gunshin was very surprised by the reaction, and the girl also looked extremely puzzled. Gunshin standing next to her. She grabbed his hand tightly and said firmly that they would go to the doctor's office. Gunshin started to stop her and tell her to wait a little bit with this decision. At this tense moment, they found themselves in the spacious office of the school nurse. The girl gently told him to just rest here quietly, and if something happened to call her. Gunshin didn't react to her caring words, lost in his thoughts. She insistently told him to be sure to call her in case of any problems or complications. After these words, the worried girl began to slowly leave the medical office. Gunshin immediately jumped up from the couch after she finally left. He had absolutely no idea what was going on around him and what kind of weak body this was. Concentrated Gunshin began to carefully check the condition of his injured arm and energy channels. The internal energy in his body was almost at the very bottom, which seriously worried him. Gunshin felt something strange and disturbing at that very critical moment of the inspection. Then the next moment he suddenly coughed up bright scarlet blood. Gunshin was horrified and wondered if he couldn't even control this weak body. This discovery greatly surprised and upset the once powerful warrior. After all, he is Gunshin from a great and powerful demonic cult and not a weakling. At this very time, a calm evening with cool air arrived outside the window of the medical office. An unknown man stood nearby and carefully watched the events taking place around him. Gunshin resolutely approached him and asked him directly why he had called him here. The man asked seriously if he remembered the man they had recently caught. Gunshin asked curiously if he meant that strange and mysterious guy. The man said affirmatively that the prisoner was constantly saying some very strange and incomprehensible things. The captured man persistently claimed that he was not from here at all and had come from another place. The main character asked with interest where exactly he was from some sect or organization, since he visually resembled a hermit. The man began to explain in detail that this was not the case at all, since the guy claimed to have arrived from another world. The main character began to say with disbelief that the prisoner was just an ordinary madman, nothing more. The man was completely serious in his words and asked what if the guy really wasn't joking. He was insistent that this information definitely needed to be given serious thought and consideration. The protagonist understood that now it was necessary to question the prisoner in detail and not laugh at him. Could this weak body really be so feeble that it couldn't use even a fraction of its internal chi energy? The main character suddenly paid close attention to something very important in the space around him. He finally realized that this place was definitely not the world he was used to living in. The people and things he was familiar with had never existed here before. The main character seriously thought about all the circumstances of his current mysterious life and situation. He suddenly realized that according to the system, he should be receiving the promised reward for completing the task. The protagonist began to scream loudly, demanding that the system immediately give him the reward he deserved. Why did the system suddenly go quiet and pretend that it wasn't going to give him anything? The main character did not understand how to make this mysterious thing appear and began to demand its appearance. It was at that critical moment that the long-awaited system finally appeared right before his eyes. Gunshin resolutely told the system to return him back to his home world as quickly as possible. There are very important reasons in that world why he should definitely return there. He has a lot of important things there that he must protect and guard at all costs. At a critical moment, something very strange and unusual began to happen to the surrounding space. Gunshin couldn't understand what kind of unknown force was affecting him. He wasn't sure how pleasant the sensations were. He wondered hopefully if he would finally be able to return back to his home world. His long-awaited reward turned out to be quite strange. a very pleasant aroma began to emanate from his body. The main character was very surprised and puzzled by such an unusual reward from the system. The main character could not understand at all what this was and why he needed such a reward. He resolutely tried to strike the mysterious scroll that had materialized in the air right in front of him. The main character was surprised and could not understand where this strange object had suddenly disappeared to. The main character began to say with disappointment that he was a complete loser in all his endeavors. The main character did not understand how long that girl had been standing next to him and watching him. She said irritably that he was too noisy and did not allow her to concentrate properly on her work. The main character did not understand at all the meaning of the unfamiliar word rent in this context. She asked him with concern what had happened to him, whether he had gone crazy. Gunshin tried to say something back to her, but the words came out unintelligible and strange. She mockingly said that he was a real loser and told him to finally get his thoughts together. The next moment, the main character suddenly disappeared from the surprised girl's field of vision. She started saying that this is why no one wants to talk to him at school. At a critical moment, the main character suddenly appeared right in front of her, as if materializing out of thin air. He seriously addressed the girl standing next to him with a question that was very important to him. He said that everyone around him constantly calls him a loser, but what does that word even mean? She couldn't understand why he suddenly started asking such strange questions. At the critical moment, someone forcefully knocked down the door and quickly entered the room. It was that same aggressive guy who said he had finally found the main character. The main character asked in surprise if it was the same annoying person again. In the tense moment, the first of the attackers stared at him with obvious menace. The man confidently said that the enemy had come to believe in himself after recent events. The main character asked in bewilderment what had happened. Had the attacker really become the leader among these guys? At a critical moment, the enemy hit him, but the main character began to skillfully defend himself in time. He couldn't tell if his physical body had yet fully recovered from the transfer. The enraged man swung his arm again threateningly to deliver another powerful blow. He started talking aggressively so that the guy would finally die and stop annoying him. Perhaps if the enemy falls asleep forever, then at least he will finally shut up and stop bothering you. The attackers persistently told the protagonist to stop constantly retreating and start fighting. The frightened girl begged the aggressors not to come too close to her. The man rudely told his opponent to stop backing away and hit him right in the leg. The main character began to fall uncontrollably right onto the frightened girl standing next to him. At that critical moment, the girl fell onto the safety net that was behind her. At the moment of the fall, she began to scream loudly from fear and the unexpectedness of what happened. The guy said with horror that there was a fifth-floor building with a hard surface below. At a critical moment, the man began to realize the seriousness of the situation. The main character reassuringly said that she would not die, at most she would get a couple of broken bones. The guy didn't understand what this sick bastard was even talking about in such a critical situation. The next moment, the main character suddenly saw a message from the system with a new task. It was an emergency mission to save a girl who fell because of him. The reward remained unknown. Of course, it is very convenient when the system blames him for something that happened due to the fault of others. Then the aggressor began to suspiciously ask what the main character had planned to do there. The main character, without hesitation, simply jumped down after the falling girl to save her. He sincerely hopes that this time the reward from the system will be truly worthwhile. Gunshin began to quickly approach the falling girl and extend his saving hand to her. At a critical moment, the main character managed to successfully save the girl from certain death. She slowly opened her frightened eyes and looked closely at her savior. She said with surprise that he no longer looked like a complete loser. The main character asked her caringly if she was very scared, but the girl did not understand what he was talking about. Since she is still able to talk and answer questions, she is definitely alive. She couldn't understand why her heart was beating so hard and fast after being rescued. The man above continued to stand there in surprise and did not understand what to do now. Then, at a critical moment, he suggested to his accomplices that they simply run away from there. The guy tried to say something in response, but couldn't find the right words. Dango became uncontrollably furious and started asking if he would clean up this mess. The guy naturally didn't give him him any intelligible answer to this fair question. He said firmly that they had never been here and that what had happened should be forgotten. At the critical moment, his facial expression suddenly and radically changed to one of fear. Right at that moment, he saw the guy in front of him, but he didn't understand what was happening to him. Something very strange and frightening for observers began to happen to the enemy's body. Gunshin stared straight at him with his cold and merciless eyes. At a tense moment, someone approached the frightened man with threatening words. The protagonist mockingly asked where the coward was going to run away from him so quickly. The man did not understand how this was even possible because the guy had definitely fallen from a great height. The protagonist told him to forget about the fall because thanks to it he received an excellent reward. The main character confidently said that now they would all beat him half to death. Everyone present literally worshipped him after demonstrating such incredible strength and agility. The main character methodically beat all the attackers half to death, showing no mercy to them. The main character, after dealing with the enemies, began to say something important to the defeated opponents. He began to ask if they considered him here to be just a weakling and a loser. He said that he really used to be a so-called weakling and a complete loser, but now the situation has changed dramatically and he has gained incredible strength to fight. Weakling, loser, weakling, useless, trash, all these insults no longer apply to him. No one dares to call him that any more than he demanded to be called sir. The main character asked menacingly as he addressed him whether he wanted to die right there. The defeated opponent said in fear that it was very rude of him. At that moment, the remnants of his former strength were still very small and limited, but it was still his real strength that he felt in his body. His enemies asked him in bewilderment where he got so much confidence in his abilities. Because no one in this world dares to imitate his unique and unrepeatable power. So it can be said with complete certainty that he really did use his true power, and it was still entirely possible to return back to one's native world. The protagonist clenched his fist after this encouraging and inspiring thought of returning. He did not understand what unknown force had thrown him into this strange world. The main character said that no matter how you look at it, this world is incredibly strange. The women here walk around in such short and provocative clothes that it surprises him. One only has to look at these guys' hairstyles and he can't understand why they look like that. This world is truly full of all sorts of oddities that amaze and surprise him. But why are people around him worried that something is wrong with his face since he is sitting on Dango's shoulders? The guy said with a grin that it was probably because he was riding them. Gunshin asked in confusion what was wrong with this and why everyone was reacting like this. He always rode like that in his world, don't they want to give him a ride? The guy laughed and said no, of course they don't want to do that. But the next moment he suddenly stopped laughing and became serious. Gunshin said that he had been racking his brains for so long that he had become very hungry. He said decisively that they would definitely go to a restaurant to eat delicious food. He urgently needs to fill his empty stomach with quality food. Dango was genuinely surprised that they were going to an actual restaurant. After some time, they were sitting peacefully at the table in the spacious school cafeteria. The main character, oddly enough, was eating with appetite at that very moment. Dango said with surprise that he was wolfing down the offered food. Gunshin said with admiration that the food served here was really awesome and delicious. The boy said that their school food was always very tasty and Gunshin asked if he would eat it. At that moment, the guy started to say what would happen, but Gunshin didn't listen to him until the end. The guy was clearly unhappy that his food was taken without permission. At a critical moment, someone suddenly appeared in the spacious school cafeteria. Some unknown guy was very surprised by what was happening before his eyes. After that, he angrily kicked the chair standing next to him out of anger. He aggressively asked what these two were doing here on his territory. Dango looked nervously at the approaching Sangu and realized that he was in trouble. He instantly realized that he was now definitely doomed by this influential man. At a critical moment, someone aggressively approached the calmly sitting protagonist. Sangu stared at him with his evil eyes in uncontrollable rage. Gunshin slowly raised his eyes and looked back at him calmly. He hit himself on the forehead and said that it meant that the rumors that were being spread were not lies. Did they really carry this freak like a real king or something like that? The guy started laughing mockingly and asking what exactly the word carried meant. Everyone present started laughing loudly at them and saying that they were complete idiots. One of them suggested to Sang that they also give the main character a ride. Gunshin had absolutely no idea what this unfamiliar word meant in this context. At a tense moment, the guy threateningly addressed him with a demand. He ordered him to get his ass up to the roof right now. He then contemptuously called the protagonist a timid cat who was afraid of a real fight. After these words, he simply turned around and began to leave the dining room. Gunshin continued to eat his delicious food calmly, ignoring what was happening around him. Gunshin asked the boy if he knew that even a dog is not disturbed when it eats. Sangu looked at him in surprise and asked in bewilderment what he was talking about. He asked if this complete idiot really didn't realize the seriousness of the situation around him. Gunshin looked at his angry opponent in surprise and assessed his aggressive behavior. Gunshin said that he congratulated him, and everyone present asked what exactly. Gunshin calmly said that they would now be freed from all their problems and worries. After these mysterious words, the guy looked closely at his potential opponent. Gunshin explained that he would now have a new horse to ride. After all this conversation, everyone present went out onto the spacious roof of the building. Gunshin looked carefully at all the potential opponents gathered around him. Sangu stared at the boy, trying to understand his true intentions. Gunshin asked in bewilderment if they had eaten too much henbane since they were behaving so stupidly. Gunshin asked what this was all about since he had seen them eating in the dining room. Sangu still couldn't understand if the guy was completely serious in his words. The guy told the main character that of course he believes in him, but it will be difficult with Sangu's gang. Gunshin said understandingly that he completely understood him and was ready for the upcoming test. He wants to test something in battle, and he doesn't give a damn about these idiots. If he thinks correctly about the system, then let it appear to him right now. The mission to clean up the trash has appeared again, and he will receive restorative herbs as a reward. Gunshin said that it seemed like everything was ready and it was time to get new horses. One of the guys didn't understand what was happening and why the sky suddenly darkened above them. Then he looked in surprise towards the direction from which the strange pressure was coming. Everyone saw Gunshin coming towards them and realized that he had definitely gone crazy. One of the guys became uncontrollably furious at such impudence on the part of the enemy. He said that he had recently trained intensively with a real boxing champion. Does the enemy really understand what he is getting into by throwing down such a bold challenge? Even if he is not his own equal, then his opponent is certainly no one. Let him try to do something. This bastard seems so scared that he doesn't even say anything in response to the challenge. The guy just started moving confidently towards the enemy at that very moment. The attacker didn't understand what was happening to him. Seriously, what incredible pressure was coming from the enemy. He realized that something was starting to affect him, but he couldn't figure out what exactly. The fighter only realized that something was definitely wrong with the atmosphere around him. This realization was very sad for him and his further plans for victory. Gunshin remembered how he once trained under an experienced martial arts instructor. At that moment, he was genuinely surprised by the words of his wise teacher. The man sternly said that the student was moving completely incorrectly in his attacks. This is the last time he explains the basics, so let him listen carefully and remember. Particular attention should be paid to proper footwork during a fight with an opponent. Most martial artists only use their legs to avoid strikes or keep distance, but real masters use them to limit the enemy's movement and take a comfortable position. At a critical moment, the man began to demonstrate the correct technique of movement in combat. Gunshin moved in exactly the same way and ended up right behind his opponent. The protagonist swung to demonstrate the correct technique for delivering a blow. The main character realized that the guy hadn't even learned the basics of martial arts properly. Naturally, the main character easily and quickly dealt with the inexperienced opponent. Everyone present was very surprised when they saw such a demonstration of skill. The protagonist calmly looked at all the remaining potential opponents. The boy then asked loudly if everyone present had seen his true abilities. Danho and his gang were very surprised and amazed by the skill they saw. Sangu gang was extremely surprised by what was happening, as no one expected such a turn of events to happen before them. The protagonist loudly declared to them that they always approached him one by one, as if showing some semblance of respect. The enraged character began to shout furiously at them, blaming the entire group for the fact that they were now all attacking together. However, after his words, not all members of the gang immediately began to take active offensive actions against him. The main character naturally immediately prepared for defense and began to put up serious resistance to the enemies attacking him. The determined main hero immediately began to actively use his special combat forces against numerous enemies. Sangu remained alive, looking on in horror. The winner slowly and menacingly began to approach the last surviving representative of the enemy gang. Frightened Sangu asked his opponent in a trembling voice who he really was. The protagonist smiled mysteriously and looked intently at the frightened enemy, enjoying the moment of his complete superiority. The confident warrior calmly told his defeated opponent that he was the strongest among the entire demonic cult. The guy who heard these words was so surprised and shocked that he could hardly contain his own amazement. At that very moment, the protagonist, without warning, swiftly attacked his last remaining opponent. The blow dealt by the main character turned out to be incredibly powerful and crushing, striking everyone present with its destructive force. All eyewitnesses of this brutal duel unanimously believed that what was happening before their eyes was real madness. During that tense moment, Gunshin simply stood motionless in his place, carefully watching the events unfold. Gunshin calmly told those around him that now was the time for the next important actions and decisions. Before carrying out the main task, he made a firm decision to carefully check the condition of his faithful war horse. However, before this important task, the hero decided to carefully study and evaluate the well-deserved reward he had received. For his heroic efforts and victory over his enemies, he received valuable restorative medicinal herbs. The protagonist was pleasantly surprised by the fact that the herbs turned out to be restorative. It was much better than expected. At this significant moment, the attentive Gunshin looked intently at something very important that caught his close attention. A determined Gunshin began to beat Sangu, demanding that he tell the truth or stand up if he wanted to sacrifice himself. The ruthless warrior contemptuously told his defeated opponent that he was the worst and most pitiful of all the enemies he had ever met. At this dramatic moment, all the spectators present turned their close attention to the main character of the events taking place. Naturally, when the winner passed by them, all the people began to quietly whisper and discuss his amazing abilities. The defeated Sangu was forced to carry his conqueror on his own back during this humiliating moment for him. A confident Gunshin calmly announced to those around him that he was currently actively looking for one specific person. Intrigued by what was happening, the guy asked him with curiosity what exactly all these mysterious words meant. Focused on his goal, Gunshin made it clear that he was persistently searching for members of a dangerous demonic cult. The guy who heard this explanation naturally did not understand at all what all these strange words could mean. Irritated, Gunshin hit him sharply on the head and sternly asked if he could walk normally. The increasingly impatient warrior menacingly asked the prisoner if he wanted to die right here and now. The methodical Gunshin began to list the various sects in detail and persistently ask what else there might be. The protagonist demandingly asked the prisoner if he knew anything else useful for the investigation. At that tense moment, the very frightened boy suddenly showed signs of surprise and sudden understanding of what was happening. An impatient Gunshin sharply asked the prisoner what was happening to him and whether he should refresh his memory with another blow. At this critical moment, the frightened boy suddenly remembered the famous best sword of the entire Cheonan region. Hearing these important words, Gunshin instantly became furious and asked menacingly what exactly was said. At that very moment, events were unfolding in some remote and quiet teacher's office. Tired of waiting, Gunshin sat patiently at his school desk, looking forward to the end of the tiring school day. Finally, the long-awaited bell rang, and this sound meant the approaching end of another boring school lesson. All the students knew that when the third and final bell rang, they would finally be able to leave the stuffy room. Sitting at his desk, Gunshin realized with relief that he was indeed right here in a school classroom. Ahead of him was a meeting with a man known as the best sword in the entire Cheonan region and its surroundings. At this crucial moment, an unfamiliar middle-aged man resolutely entered the classroom. Seeing the stranger enter, the attentive Gunshin was very surprised by this unexpected appearance in the classroom. The sudden appearance of the stern man made the usually calm Gunshin start to get seriously nervous and worried about what was happening. The man who entered the classroom began to demand in a stern voice that all the students immediately open their textbooks. In a threatening tone, he warned the students that if they did not want serious trouble, it was the Korean language teacher Park Jong-nam. Sitting at his desk, Gunshin could not understand whether this was the man who was called the famous Chonam sword. The protagonist's eyes literally glowed with anticipation and excitement at this extremely important moment for him. His entire body was burning with internal fire and impatience, preparing for the upcoming serious test and verification of strength. The protagonist thought with disdain that if this was really the best sword, then this bastard would die very soon. Meanwhile, in the neighboring class, none of the students could understand where these strange goosebumps came from. What would one expect if there were actually other martial artists in this establishment? His heightened senses allowed him to clearly sense the presence of their powerful and dangerous fighting energy in the building. He couldn't understand why he had even decided to say all these rash and careless words out loud. The main character regretfully admitted to himself that in this situation he really did behave like a real idiot. Suddenly, the main character noticed some object moving in his direction and deftly stopped it with his fingers. The main character, who quickly got his bearings, suddenly jumped up from his seat and loudly declared that it was a real ambush. The hero, enraged by what was happening, demanded of everyone present who exactly dared to commit this vile act. The teacher, watching what was happening, wondered in bewilderment whether this strange guy was completely crazy. In a stern and commanding voice, the teacher ordered the excited student to immediately approach him for a serious conversation. The main character could not finally understand whether this was really the same legendary man. To his disappointment, he was unable to catch even such a simple and insignificant thing as a flying object. This human body turned out to be amazingly weak and terribly unsuited for serious combat and battle. The teacher continued to persistently ask if this guy was a normal person and told him to come over again. At this critical moment, the usually calm Gunshin really began to slowly but surely go crazy. After a short pause, the main character raised his head and looked carefully towards the strict school teacher. The teacher looked at this strange and incomprehensible student with obvious bewilderment and growing concern. The main character, with undisguised rage in his eyes, stared intently and menacingly at the man standing in front of him. The teacher, feeling the growing tension in the air, continued to silently and attentively observe the behavior of the strange student. After this short but tense confrontation, the protagonist exhaled heavily and with relief the accumulated air. Then he raised his head again and looked even more intently at the puzzled school teacher. The determined protagonist slowly stood up from his seat and began to confidently walk towards the teacher. With each step, the protagonist, becoming more and more threatening, gradually approached the teacher standing at the board. The next second, completely unexpectedly for everyone, he simply walked past the confused teacher without touching him in any way. Intrigued by what was happening, the teacher wondered with great interest what would happen next in the classroom. The teacher looked at the main character with obvious surprise and bewilderment after this strange and incomprehensible act. Then the angry teacher resolutely swung his long index stick, preparing to take decisive action against the offender. With a quick and precise movement, the strict teacher firmly grabbed the passing protagonist by the school uniform. Outraged by the student's behavior, the man sternly asked him where exactly this impudent guy was going to go. The teacher reminded the troublemaker that the lesson was still going on and no one had given permission to leave the classroom. It seems that modern children have absolutely no manners or basic respect for their teachers. The main character began to tell the teacher with irritation that he was constantly muttering and muttering something under his breath. The impatient protagonist contemptuously asked who this pathetic weakling was standing in front of him and preventing him from walking. The confused teacher could not understand what exactly this strange and impudent student was talking about. The teacher asked the offender in bewilderment where he could have heard such information or rumors. The main character mockingly asked the teacher what exactly he was talking about, that he was a weakling. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, the teacher sternly told the class that all students should study independently until he returned, and this impudent and daring guy should silently follow him for a serious educational conversation. A few minutes later, they emerged onto the spacious school roof where they could talk in private. The main character asked with annoyance why as soon as something happens he is immediately called here. The strict teacher silently and attentively looked at the impudent and disobedient student standing in front of him. At this tense moment, the teacher asked him directly whether he was from Jeonnam. The main character could not understand at all why the teacher would suddenly make such assumptions about him. Then why the hell does this person allow himself to communicate with him like that? Did he really want problems? The main character could not understand what this strange man was constantly mumbling about and what he was trying to say. The teacher told the boy in a stern and demanding voice to immediately begin answering the questions posed. The angry teacher continued to repeat it many times in a row, so that the impudent boy would finally start answering him normally. Now this impudent student does not even deign to give the teacher any answers to legitimate demands and questions. The bewildered protagonist had absolutely no idea why the man standing in front of him suddenly started laughing. Then the strangely behaving man suddenly began to laugh very loudly and continuously, frightening those around him. The main character, as a response, also began to laugh loudly and demonstratively in the teacher's face. After this, the excited man again began to laugh loudly and uncontrollably, not controlling his emotions. Then the teacher, who had suddenly calmed down abruptly and threateningly, swung at the impudent student standing in front of him. In a stern voice, he told the boy that he still had a lot to learn in life. The next second, the angry teacher quickly began to attack the impudent and disobedient boy standing in front of him. Then something unexpected happened that greatly surprised and shocked the battle-experienced teacher. The protagonist instantly stopped the enemy's attack aimed at him and grabbed the wooden stick tightly. After successfully blocking, the protagonist simply continued to stand silently and motionless at this critical moment. The main character, confident in his abilities, calmly and intently looked at the man, who was taken aback by the surprise. Shocked by the unexpected turn of events, the teacher could only stare silently at his strange opponent in front of him. The teacher noticed with surprise that the boy did not even move or flinch at this dangerous moment. What was happening made the experienced fighter very worried and think about the current situation at that moment. Then the puzzled teacher slowly turned his head and looked closely at the mysterious guy standing next to him. The confused teacher had absolutely no idea what exactly this strange and incomprehensible phenomenon in front of him was. The worried teacher anxiously wondered whether he would have to die in this unexpected and dangerous duel. Then the man, having mobilized all his strength, suddenly jumped up, preparing to continue a serious combat confrontation with the enemy. At that moment, he clearly realized that he had performed this maneuver purely reflexively, without any conscious thought. At that critical second, his foot was rapidly approaching the body of the mysterious guy standing in front of him. The teacher could not understand what exactly he was doing with an ordinary school student in such a situation. The next moment, the confused man began to tell himself that he needed to calm down immediately. The main character said ironically that it turns out that there is also a real master of martial arts here. The enraged teacher's leg continued to approach the body of the enemy calmly, standing in front of him at great speed. The teacher continued to wonder what exactly he was doing with the most ordinary school student in this situation. The agitated man began to address himself with the demand that he immediately stop these dangerous actions. Gunshin said with surprise that it turned out that there was also a real high-level martial arts master present here. The opponents continued to wage a fierce battle, each demonstrating their best fighting skills and abilities. At a critical moment in the fight, the experienced teacher suddenly jumped back, trying to gain a tactical advantage over his opponent. The protagonist looked at his unexpectedly agile combat opponent with obvious surprise and interest. Then an attentive observer noticed that the teacher's hand was visibly shaking, which betrayed his inner excitement. The sight he saw greatly surprised the protagonist, as he did not expect such a reaction from an experienced fighter. The angry hero became furious at this damn weak body, realizing that the problem had started again. It was necessary right now to give this opponent a good club and show who the real master was here. The confused teacher could not fully understand what exactly had just happened in this strange duel. He began to think of Gajin as a true martial artist of high level and great ability. It was very strange, but this guy just almost used martial arts. Isn't he afraid of ghost killers? Gajin always seemed like a quiet and calm guy, but now it became clear that he was just hiding it. The main character demanded that the enemy show something already. The man did not understand whether the guy had gone crazy. The teacher could not understand at all what was happening in this extremely strange and incomprehensible situation. The protagonist asked the confused man with irritation why he was staring at him so intently. When the student called him uncle, the teacher sternly asked if the boy was speaking informally to him again. The main character mockingly began to ask the teacher again what exactly he had said that was so important. The enraged teacher realized that he simply had to finish off this impudent and daring bastard once and for all. However, the man began to tell himself that he first needed to calm down and make sure that he was doing the right thing. At this crucial moment, the teacher resolutely addressed the mysterious and dangerous guy standing in front of him. The teacher asked him directly if he was a martial arts master, which surprised him greatly as a teacher. However, such abilities cannot be used left and right. If he continues, he will run into big trouble. The main character couldn't understand what trouble meant, so this is what the teacher was saying all this time. The biggest problem is that the hero met this strange and dangerous man at all. The serious man began to say that he saw a student in front of him. It was not even a matter of a teacher. The teacher suggested talking calmly and admitted that what he had done earlier was a serious mistake on his part. Unless the teacher means completely different words and ways of solving the problem that has arisen between them. The determined teacher gripped his wooden stick tightly, preparing to continue the serious combat confrontation. The experienced fighter took a correct and stable fighting stance, demonstrating readiness for a decisive battle with the enemy. The protagonist told his opponent with satisfaction that this was exactly what he had been waiting for so long. Confident of victory, the protagonist declared that he would personally check whether the teacher was really better or not. Then the teacher sighed heavily, thinking that teachers were simply watching as students went astray. There are no such teachers in this world, so this is his very last warning before decisive action. Let the impudent student no longer use informal speech when addressing elders and teachers. The main character looked at the angry teacher in front of him with obvious surprise and some mockery. The cheeky boy asked the teacher with interest what exactly would happen if he continued to speak informally. Hearing this impudent question, the indignant teacher remained silent in surprise, not knowing what to answer to such insolence. The teacher sternly said that the student had now crossed the final line, and there was no turning back for him. After these words, the angry teacher finally became furious with the behavior of the impudent and daring student. The man promised that now he would begin to teach the boy good behavior and respect with all his heart. The determined teacher told the enemy that they would begin serious training right now without further delay. The next moment, the enraged teacher began to approach the impudent guy standing in front of him very quickly. The experienced fighter resolutely began to actively attack his young and impudent opponent by all available means. The teacher looked attentively and intently at his unexpected opponent, assessing his fighting capabilities and reactions. At the critical moment, he attacked, but the protagonist successfully and deftly dodged the aimed blow. Then the quickly oriented protagonist skillfully blocked another attack from his experienced combat opponent. The main character looked calmly and confidently at the teacher, demonstrating a complete lack of fear in front of a serious opponent. The unyielding teacher once again swung his weapon decisively at this critical moment in the combat confrontation. The teacher then quickly attacked, but the boy jumped back sharply, avoiding a potentially dangerous blow for himself. The persistent teacher began to actively attack his young opponent again, not wanting to give up in this fight. The protagonist quickly pressed himself against the stone wall, trying to gain a tactical advantage in the current combat situation. An attentive observer noticed that the angry man was again rapidly approaching him with clearly aggressive intentions. At this critical moment, the resourceful protagonist suddenly saw an ordinary cleaning mop next to him. Quickly assessing the situation, the protagonist immediately grabbed the improvised weapon he had found for protection. The quick-witted fighter then threw the mop high into the air, performing some kind of clever tactical maneuver. This action was completely incomprehensible to those around him, but this strange act clearly had a certain meaning. Distracted by the movement, the man noticed a mop flying right above his head and lost concentration. Then the main character began to move actively, and this unexpected action greatly surprised the experienced teacher. As it turned out, it was a diversionary maneuver. The main character attacked at that moment and asked where the enemy was looking. However, the experienced man easily began to defend himself from the unexpected attack, demonstrating a high level of combat skill. The teacher, without any visible emotion or effort, stopped the attack of the young and daring opponent directed at him. To lose vigilance during a serious battle, how pathetic and unworthy of a true master. On the other hand, the guy was still so young but already so strong and dangerous in battle. He must have been secretly studying martial arts all this time, hiding his true abilities from those around him. Of course, such abilities and skills at such a young age were truly amazing and impressive. Gunshin, who was watching what was happening, had absolutely no idea what was happening to him at that moment. Why is he giggling like a complete idiot instead of seriously concentrating on an important fight? The next moment, the concentrated man resolutely pointed his wooden stick towards the young opponent. The teacher solemnly said that the boy should now exert himself because he would use the 36 heavenly swords of Chanam. Hearing these menacing words, the attentive Gunshin was demonstratively surprised and prepared for a serious test of his strength. After this important warning, the teacher began to smile, mysteriously anticipating a demonstration of his supreme fighting skill. Then, with a determined attitude, Gunshin broke the mop he was holding in half with one powerful movement, showing his strength. The warrior explained that the head of the cult was always nagging him about this bad habit and telling him to stop doing it. The confused teacher naturally had absolutely no idea what exactly this strange guy could possibly be talking about. Gunshin confidently said that he had always won this way, so he simply ignored the cult leader's words. A determined Gunshin confidently grabbed the wooden stick, preparing to demonstrate his true fighting ability. The self-confident warrior solemnly told his opponent that he would now show him true skill in action. The teacher was about to see the real 36 heavenly swords of Chanam in all their destructive glory. The impressed teacher asked in surprise when this amazing guy would stop amazing him with his abilities. Indeed, it had been a long time since the experienced teacher had experienced such exciting sensations from a combat confrontation. At this tense moment, an ordinary pigeon sat nearby and carefully watched everything that was happening. When the opponents began to move towards each other, the frightened bird immediately flew high into the sky. The two experienced fighters simultaneously began to decisively approach each other for the final and decisive clash. Several feathers from the frightened bird slowly fell to the floor, creating a dramatic atmosphere of the upcoming fight. Both opponents simultaneously loudly declared that they were using the legendary 36 heavenly swords technique. Then the warriors ready for battle simultaneously began to cast battle spells against each other. An absolutely wild smile appeared on the faces of both combatants in anticipation of a grand combat confrontation. Their wooden sticks collided with each other with great force, creating a powerful impact sound. At the critical moment of the collision, the man noticed with horror that his stick began to rapidly break into pieces. The experienced teacher could not believe what was happening before his eyes. It seemed completely impossible. After this grandiose clash, a powerful explosion occurred that shook the entire surrounding area around the combatants. Both opponents somehow managed to remain standing in their original positions after the devastating explosion. However, at this critical moment, the man was unable to stay on his feet and shamefully fell to the ground. The next second, someone unknown suddenly stopped the main character, who was preparing to continue the fight. The worried teacher said with alarm that the person who appeared was a dangerous ghost killer from a legendary organization. The enraged Gunshin became furious and sternly asked the intruder what he wanted from them. In front of them stood a completely unfamiliar man in dark clothes with suspicious intentions. The wary guy looked closely at the stranger who appeared in front of them at this tense moment. All three participants in the situation were completely confused, silent, but continued to stand warily in their places. After a short silence, the stranger slowly turned and looked intently towards the confused teacher. His gaze was completely stern and did not bode well for those present. The worried teacher cautiously asked the stranger if he was really the organization's phantom assassin. The mysterious guy didn't answer the direct question and simply remained silent, keeping the secret. An irritated Gunshin resolutely demanded that the stranger immediately release his clenched hand. Let these people just try to look at him and see the seriousness of his intentions. After these threatening words, the cautious guy quickly jumped back, maintaining a safe distance from his opponents. The stranger said contemptuously that Gunshin was a complete asshole and did not deserve any respect. Hearing such an insult, Gunshin was very surprised by the impudence of this stranger. Gunshin had just seriously violated the sacred rules of the martial arts union. In doing so, the impudent violator betrayed the sacredness of the ancient traditions and principles of the Murim, which must be observed by all. All those who dare to violate the sacred laws of the organization will definitely be severely punished according to their deserts. The perplexed Gunshin could not understand the meaning of what was said and asked again whose sacredness he had violated. The angry hero grabbed his head and said that the whole world had gone mad since when were masters sacred. The Phantom Killer could not understand at all what kind of strange reaction this was to serious accusations. The offender used martial arts on an ordinary civilian and still does not understand the seriousness of the offense. Confused Gunshin couldn't figure out what other civilian he had used his abilities on. The hero asked in bewilderment whether the killer really thought he looked like an ordinary civilian. Is this man really calling his weak abilities real martial arts, or what is this supposed to mean? However, the Phantom Killer has certain standards for using martial arts on such punks. The perpetrator of the violations will be judged by a special commission of the Union which will make a final fair decision. The killer asked the intruder if he knew who the Phantom Killers were and what their sacred mission was. Gunshin replied that even if he knew, so what if these people were paid so much? The teacher who was present at the conversation was at that moment very surprised by the audacity of his student. The Phantom Killer simply remained silent in the face of such impudence, not wanting to condescend to explain to the ignoramus. A representative of the organization explained that the Phantom Assassins stop the insane use of martial arts and protect civilians. They are the reliable shield of all Murim and maintain order in a dangerous world. Hearing this, Gunshin promised that, with this vaunted shield, he would smash the killer's head in once and for all. Wherever you go, you will find people who are obsessed with justice and who prevent you from living a normal life. Today, the angry hero will finally destroy this annoying justice and its annoying defenders. The worried teacher at the critical moment began to actively stop his hot and dangerous student. The teacher began to say that there was clearly a serious misunderstanding here that could be resolved peacefully. Can these weak abilities be called real martial arts, or is it something completely different? The teacher said that of course the Union will decide for itself, but if it closes its eyes it promises not to repeat it again. The killer asked why exactly he should make concessions since he was simply doing his duty. The organization's representative recalled that, according to the contract, for the work of the Phantom Killer's violations are punished to the fullest extent. The stubborn guy categorically said that he refused to obey and would definitely beat this imposter. The desperate teacher began to shout loudly that Gunshin was his personal disciple and was under protection. The echo of his scream even appeared in the surrounding space, emphasizing the seriousness of the moment. The indignant hero hit the teacher on the head and asked why he would be his student. The Phantom Killer, after hearing this, became seriously enraged by the impudence of this daring intruder. The organization's representative sternly asked whether the man had really taken this hooligan as his student. Even the usually calm Gunshin was surprised by what was happening and did not understand what his student meant. At the critical moment, the worried man quickly shut Gunshin's mouth, preventing further trouble. The teacher quickly said that he had taken the boy as a student, but his skills were not yet developed at all. So the teacher asks the Phantom Killer to forgive the inexperienced student this time and give him a chance. After listening to the explanation, the Phantom Killer simply remained silent during this tense moment, thinking about the situation. The teacher explained that Gunshin was only just beginning his journey if he were taken to the Union now. He will be registered as a dangerous criminal, but he is still young and has not seen the world. The teacher asks for a ghost killer. Maybe he ended up here by accident, maybe it's fate. Perhaps it really was destiny that brought them all together at the right moment. The teacher admitted in surprise that he still believed in such superstitions and signs from above. The Phantom Killer looked silently and attentively at the pleading teacher, weighing all the circumstances of the case. The next moment, the representative of the organization slowly began to hide his cold weapon in its sheath. After this, the hopeful teacher, relieved, began to sincerely thank the magnanimous ghost killer for his understanding. The teacher admitted that he had already felt the presence of a strong master in the school building this morning. This mysterious presence must have been a ghostly assassin from a powerful organization. However, the representative warned that this was the last time and there would be no more concessions. The understanding man said that he understood everything and once again thanked the generous ghost killer. Then the grateful teacher solemnly said that he thanked the respected representative of the organization for his mercy. The teacher promised that such a violation would never happen again, and the stranger suddenly disappeared. After the Phantom Killer disappeared without a trace, the exhausted man sighed heavily. After this stress, the exhausted teacher simply began to slowly fall into a deep faint. Then the completely exhausted teacher simply fell helplessly onto the hard ground unconscious. Confused Gunshin asked in bewilderment where the ghost killer got such incredible power from. The unconscious teacher naturally simply remained silent at this critical moment for him. Then, after some time, they finally began to talk calmly about the events that had happened. Pensive Gunshin decided to finally sum up this whole strange and confusing conversation with the teacher. The hero asked if he really couldn't use the arts here without special permission from the teacher. Confused Gunshin wondered why everyone around him was constantly making up rules regarding his personal powers. How many times do I have to repeat that times have changed dramatically? They no longer survive by brute force. It was a really shitty place. Why does the hero act like a complete idiot at school? The indignant teacher sternly asked the student why he allowed himself to speak so insolently to his elders. Relaxed Gunshin lay down on the ground and told the teacher that he was speaking in all seriousness. The tired man replied that he didn't care and didn't want to continue this tiresome conversation any longer. The main character told the teacher with understanding that everything was perfectly clear to him from the explanations. After all, the hero really did find himself in a very strange and incomprehensible place. If martial arts exist here, then a demonic cult must exist somewhere too. At this important moment, the main character suddenly jumped up and remembered something very important. The worried protagonist asked the man where the demonic cult was, but the teacher was no longer there. The teacher had already started to go down the stairs, and the main character was very surprised. The worried protagonist began to stop the departing teacher and ask where he was going. The teacher reminded that it is the student who can skip classes and he is the responsible teacher. In short, they will definitely talk later, but now they need to get back to their lessons. A puzzled Gunshin wondered if the lesson was really more important than all these events. This lesson may be complete crap and not worth your time. Although the teacher irritates him, he still remains very important for solving problems. The departing man said farewell words and wished the remaining student good luck in his future endeavors. Confused Gunshin asked in bewilderment what he should do now in this situation. Then the imperturbable man simply slammed the door behind him, leaving the student completely alone. The main character was truly enraged by such irresponsible behavior of his mentor. After this unpleasant incident, the upset protagonist leaned back and thought about what was happening. The teacher, who remained below side, heavily understanding the complexity of the situation with the unusual student. The teacher admitted to himself that he himself was trying to figure out this whole confusing matter. At this important moment, a familiar system panel suddenly appeared in front of the seated protagonist. At the same time, other important events were unfolding between the characters on the school roof. The protagonist stood in front of someone unknown, preparing for another serious confrontation. By all indications, the protagonist was clearly in a state of intense rage over the events that were taking place. Someone told the enemy to do whatever he wants. He's finished if he lets his allies down. The thoughtful protagonist clearly understood that he had become very bored with life lately. Then the attentive observer turned his close attention to something very important nearby. The hero looked with interest at the mysterious purple scroll with important information lying in front of him. This was a special mission that could be continued after completing the preliminary task. The progress was 30%. The tired protagonist was sleeping peacefully on his school desk at that moment, regaining his strength. The worried teacher quietly approached the sleeping student, preparing to wake him up for an important conversation. The teacher began to loudly bang his stick on the table and tell the boy to get up immediately. Then the serious man told the sleepy student that they urgently needed to talk about important things. The man watching the reaction was very surprised by the behavior of his strange student. Awakened Gunshin said that yesterday's events had completely knocked him out. It was too much for him. The surprised man asked if the phantom killer had almost taken this guy with him. Then the indignant man literally began to curse his irresponsible and dangerous student. After a good night's sleep, all the recent strange events finally became clear in the protagonist's head. A whole bunch of incredibly strange things happened that required serious thought and understanding. Looking back at the events of the past, when he tried to say his real name, his spoken words seemed to mysteriously dissolve into the surrounding air without a trace. The leader of the demonic cult kept repeating the same thing to him, asking him not to act rashly. What the hell? So he can't reveal his true identity and origin to anyone. The worried man turned decisively to the thoughtful and absent-minded student in front of him. The teacher asked irritably whether the boy was even listening to him carefully or was thinking about something else. The main character rubbed his bruised head and said that after such a strong blow it was splitting. Due to the injury, he can hardly remember anything about recent important events. The attentive teacher was very surprised by such strange behavior of his unusual student. The protagonist carefully checked whether the man had any suspicious reaction to the words. The wary man continued to silently and intently look at his mysterious student with interest. The protagonist slowly began to rise from his seat, preparing to continue the important conversation. The hero said with understanding that this smart old man had figured everything out pretty quickly. The teacher began to carefully ask if the boy really couldn't remember anything because of the injury. The teacher kept thinking that something was wrong here. Now it's clear what the matter is. Let the student consider what is happening as a test that any protagonist of an adventure must overcome. The understanding man said that he would definitely help the injured student in this difficult situation. The teacher is either a complete idiot or a naive simpleton, but the student already feels better from the support. Curious Gunshin asked if there was a demonic cult in the area or its surroundings. The surprised man asked why the student had suddenly started talking about this dangerous and forbidden topic. Confused Gunshin wondered if he was going too far with his questions about the cult. The honest man admitted that he himself was not very sure about the existence of such an organization. A delighted Gunshin realized that this was at least some kind of clue after a very long search. The guy who listened to the answer was pleasantly surprised by the information he received from the teacher about the possibility. The thoughtful man began to say cautiously that most likely the situation was completely different. According to the teacher, the demonic cult no longer exists in nature at present. Confused Gunshin couldn't figure out what doesn't exist meant, so the man responded with an explanation. Then the teacher asked the boy why he was asking about this, and he replied that he was simply interested in the dangers. At that moment, a girl entered the office and politely asked if the guy was waiting for her. Confused Gunshin tried to understand who this strange girl was and what she wanted from him. It turned out that the mysterious visitor worked as a nurse at the school and had business with a student. The girl greeted the teacher politely, and the teacher asked her to repeat her full name. The girl who introduced herself said she was Kim Mi-jong, a third grader at a local school. She asked if she and her boyfriend were walking home together as they usually did after school. The understanding man said that he would not detain them, and Gunshin understood what that meant. The teacher said goodbye, saying that they would see each other tomorrow. They had worked hard today to solve the problems. Gunshin naturally categorically disagreed with this assessment of his efforts today. The man said that they would definitely talk tomorrow. It had been a tough day, but the student had coped. It was already a quiet evening outside, and it was time to go home after school. Gunshin and the girl were slowly walking somewhere along the evening streets, discussing the past day. The hero said that it would not be so peaceful here if there was a dangerous demonic cult. Gunshin, who was thinking about the problems, exhaled heavily, thinking about the complexity of the current situation. Then, in the next moment, the attentive hero paid close attention to something important. Curious Gunshin asked the girl walking next to him where exactly she was heading. The companion replied that she was going home to their shared house where they lived together. Surprised Gunshin could not understand what the words "to their common home" meant. The puzzled guy asked again if they really lived together in this strange place. The girl said that today had squeezed all the juices out of him. They had been living together for 3 years already. The main character was surprised by the fact that this had been going on for such an incredibly long time. The companion said that they would soon get home and rest. Dad promised to cook something tasty. Intrigued Gunshin had no idea what the mysterious something tasty could mean. The hungry protagonist's mouth began to water, and he asked hopefully if this was true. The hero admitted that he hadn't eaten anything yet today. First he would eat, then he would think about problems. The girl's offer sounded really great for the hungry and tired main character after the adventures. The next moment, Gunshin, who was walking down the street, suddenly stopped, sensing something suspicious. The worried girl began to ask her companion with concern what was wrong with him. An alarmed Gunshin grabbed her hand tightly, preparing for possible danger. The girl asked in surprise if he was really so hungry that he was behaving strangely. She started to say something about his food portion, but he goes completely in the wrong direction. The focused Gunshin didn't react to her at all at this critical moment, but simply moved forward resolutely. Gunshin was completely confused and could not understand at all what exactly was happening around him at the moment. The identities of these strangers remained a mystery to him, but it was becoming obvious that they were persistently pursuing them for some unknown reason. At that very moment, Gunshin slowly raised his head up, trying to assess the critical situation that had developed around him. After all the events that had happened, Gunshin simply fell silent, immersed in deep thoughts about his next steps and possible consequences. The girl could not understand the true meaning of everything that was happening, and looked at him intently with obvious surprise in her eyes. Suddenly they were surrounded by some unknown people who appeared out of nowhere and created a tight ring of encirclement around them. A young guy from the group of pursuers asked the others doubtfully if anyone was sure that this was really the man. The second guy confidently replied that he was absolutely sure of it, since he had heard the man's voice with his own ears. Gunshin knew full well that they were closely watching his every move, and he was most likely right in his suspicions, although now he found himself in a hopeless situation. This guy had sufficient attentiveness and observation, but he was sorely lacking in luck in critical situations. Suddenly they noticed that the mysterious man had disappeared without a trace, as if he had dissolved into thin air right before their eyes. One of the pursuers was distracted for only a second and now wondered if he had really abandoned his girlfriend and simply run away. The guy began to excitedly tell the rest of the group that their target had detected their presence and realized that he had been found. Logically, there was no way he could have gone that far in such a short period of time given the circumstances. Out of the blue, Gunshin appeared in front of them and began to demandingly ask what exactly they meant when they said that someone had escaped. Gunshin charged at the group of pursuers with fury and determination, giving them no time to think or prepare for battle. Without any warning, Gunshin began to actively attack them using his fighting skills and demonstrating impressive speed and agility. The entire team of pursuers was very surprised by the sudden appearance of the enemy and his aggressive actions, for which they were not prepared. Gunshin asked them in a threatening tone what exactly they meant when they said he had allegedly run away from them. The girl reproachfully said that he had acted stupidly by not even walking her home after everything that had happened between them. She then said with concern in her voice that they absolutely had to hurry as the situation was becoming increasingly dangerous. Gunshin looked at her silently and carefully, trying to understand the true meaning of her words and assess the degree of threat. He said that this girl was indeed telling the truth and that her fears had serious grounds for concern. Gunshin decided to put her to sleep for a short time so that she would not interfere with him while he dealt with the problems that had arisen. With one precise and quick movement, Gunshin knocked the girl out, but immediately thought about what he would say to her after she woke up. Suddenly, thick dust rose in the area, covering everything around and significantly reducing visibility for all participants in the conflict. One of the guys was completely immobilized at that critical moment when the situation required maximum mobility and quick reaction. Gunshin slowly and confidently approached the next opponent, preparing to deliver the decisive blow in this unequal fight. After this sudden maneuver, Gunshin instantly disappeared, leaving his opponents completely confused as to his whereabouts. The remaining guy desperately began to attack the place where he thought his elusive opponent was. However, Gunshin then disappeared in the same mysterious manner, as if he had the ability to become invisible at will. The guy was so surprised by what was happening that for a moment, he lost the ability to adequately respond to the situation unfolding around him. Gunshin suddenly appeared right on top and mockingly reported this fact to his confused and frightened opponent. The guy, with surprise and growing fear, began to slowly look up, trying to find the source of the threatening voice. The protagonist swung decisively at that critical moment when his opponent was in the most vulnerable and defenseless position. Gunshin was fully prepared to attack his opponent, focusing all his energy and fighting skills to deal maximum damage. Another guy was moving quickly in his direction at that very moment, trying to help his comrade in the unequal fight. The arriving ally managed to protect his comrade from the inevitable blow, demonstrating good reaction and loyalty to the team. However, he was then very much surprised by the unexpected turn of events and the abilities of his mysterious opponent. The protagonist immediately switched to the new enemy and attacked him with the same ruthlessness and efficiency. The surviving girl was very surprised by the events that took place and the demonstration of the enemy's incredible fighting abilities. One of the men asked the rest of the team in bewilderment who this mysterious and dangerous guy was. The main character began to speak threateningly that they dared to follow him without imagining imagining all the possible consequences. Moreover, they were not even mentally and physically prepared for such an unexpected turn of events in their operation. The girl sensibly suggested that they simply retreat since they were clearly not at the level to successfully confront this enemy. The guy couldn't understand what she meant by the word retreat in this critical situation. When asked if she wanted to retreat because of one opponent, she replied that it was not really about that. The girl explained that her well-developed intuition persistently told her that this man represented a mortal danger to them. The man became furious and began to rudely say that she had cowardly shit herself because of some unknown punk. He had already told her several times not to talk like that to her teammates. The girl asked in bewilderment how he could so underestimate the obvious threat posed by their enemy. The man in that tense moment simply looked at her silently and intently thinking about her words. He admitted that he had only briefly let his guard down, which led to such an unexpected turn of events. The man said angrily that this bastard must pay for his insolence and ordered everyone to prepare for the decisive battle. He loudly commanded that all team members immediately take a fighting stance and prepare for active action. Another man asked doubtfully if their leader was really serious about this situation and the proposed course of action. The leader justified himself by saying that he had lost his vigilance for only 1 second, so in principle the situation could still be corrected. He simply promised not to make such mistakes in concentrating and assessing the enemy in the future. The main character began to mockingly say what kind of nonsense he was talking about, some kind of loss of vigilance at such a critical moment. He added that this enemy had just practically died the damned son of a bitch and did not pose a serious threat. The guy was truly enraged by such humiliating and offensive remarks addressed to him by a stranger. He had never heard such instructions and teachings even from the recognized leader of the team, but here he heard them from some young brat. The main character was indeed very arrogant in his statements and clearly underestimated the seriousness of the situation. The guy promised that today the enemy would definitely die, not only because of his overly sharp and loose tongue. He promised to kill the impudent man with one precise blow and to do it as quickly and relatively painlessly as possible. All the participants in the conflict present looked in surprise at the verbal altercation between the opponents unfolding before them. The main character stated that it was complete nonsense when a bastard who would soon be lying on the floor was trying to intimidate him. He added that if the enemy has the guts to carry out his threats to their logical conclusion, of course. Suddenly all the participants in the conflict present became alert, sensing a change in the atmosphere and the approach of a decisive moment. The protagonist also fell silent, realizing that something had changed radically in the situation around him. Gunshin realized with horror that his body had stopped obeying commands and was much weaker than he had assumed. The situation was really shitty, as he was hoping to scare his opponents by taking out at least one of them. The main character could not understand whether his opponents were also martial arts masters or had some other abilities. The main character said that since he was going to die now, let the system finally leave it, looks like it needs something. Since the system called him at this critical moment, he ordered his opponents to boldly attack him. All the opponents simply stood in their places, not daring to take any active action against the mysterious enemy. The protagonist asked in bewilderment if any of them were currently having any serious problems making decisions. When asked what he was talking about, the main character replied that a small dog usually barks the loudest and creates the appearance of a threat. He added that if this is not the case, then it is unclear why the enemy is so wound up and showing aggression. The protagonist became furious and told everyone to look at how insightful he was, adding that the enemy was finished and it was time to log out of the system. Suddenly one of the guys began to slowly and carefully approach the main character, preparing for a decisive attack. The protagonist began to turn towards the approaching enemy, trying to assess the degree of the threat emanating from him. It became obvious that the protagonist's reaction time had slowed down significantly compared to his usual performance in combat situations. All opponents simultaneously began to actively attack the main character, taking advantage of his temporary weakness and slow reaction. One of the guys warned the others that they shouldn't kill the enemy, let him just remain on the brink of death. The protagonist said in despair that he no longer cared at all whether his body would explode or not as a result of overexertion. He added that he gave his opponents a fair chance to win, but they failed to use it properly. The girl looked at him with growing surprise at that critical and turning point of the battle. Then the main character literally found strength in himself and focused on his heart, trying to activate hidden reserves. After this concentration, something cardinal happened to the main character, changing the balance of power in the confrontation. The girl began to excitedly tell someone named Mahone that the enemy suddenly stopped and froze in place. The protagonist began to laugh loudly and ominously, telling those present that it was too late for any action. The protagonist then instantly grabbed one of his opponents by the hand, demonstrating the restoration of his fighting abilities. After the grab, he swung decisively to deliver a crushing blow to his helpless opponent. The guy realized that the main character really does have incredible abilities and poses a mortal threat. The enemy realized that this whole show was a bluff designed to lull their vigilance. The protagonist laughed loudly and triumphantly at that moment, enjoying the confusion and fear of his opponents. The guy, after receiving a crushing blow, began to slowly fall to the ground, losing consciousness from pain shock. The protagonist said with contempt that, as always, the truth only dawns on idiots when they see their own blood. The wounded guy fell down heavily at that moment, realizing the seriousness of the injuries and trauma he had received. The main character literally threw his severed arm to his opponent and mockingly said that he took it as a souvenir. The guy was completely furious and shouted that the main character was a real scumbag and he would definitely kill him for what he had done. The protagonist looked at the wounded enemy with obvious surprise, not expecting such a reaction to his actions. He told the wounded man that he should have chosen to have his tongue amputated instead of his arm, given his tendency to make threats. Since the protagonist used special abilities to summon additional power, this state should soon disintegrate. He thought that the effect would last perhaps 15 minutes, but perhaps even that time would not be enough for all the plans. Since it comes down to it, and this is a matter of life and death, we need to act as quickly and effectively as possible. So that the main character is not lonely in the afterlife, he should take all these idiots with him. Gunshin went somewhere with purpose at that critical moment, leaving the battlefield behind him. One of the remaining guys cautiously approached the place where the main events were taking place. The main character began to speak threateningly that now they would all go on their last journey together. He added that they would go to meet the mysterious cult leader who was behind all the events that were happening. Suddenly, some kind of powerful and strong chain appeared in the air, materializing as if out of nowhere. This heavy metal chain landed right on the arm of one of the guys, restricting his movements. Some unknown man began to ask the victim with concern if everything was all right. It turned out to be the team leader, and the girl excitedly said that they urgently needed reinforcements since the situation was extremely dangerous. The leader did not understand what additional reinforcements might be needed in this seemingly routine situation. However, the next moment he apparently finally realized the seriousness and criticality of the situation that had developed around them. The protagonist resolutely grabbed the chain with his hand and began to pull it towards himself with force, demonstrating impressive physical strength. This maneuver actually worked, and the protagonist dealt a crushing blow to the enemy at the same moment. The protagonist mockingly asked his defeated opponent how he liked this technique and demonstration of strength. Kanmu High School looked like a typical high school, no different from thousands of other educational institutions. However, among martial artists, it is a special school that nurtures promising talents from prestigious families. The girl came from a very ordinary family without any special connections or influence in the martial arts community. She was chosen as a scholarship recipient and entered a school where she found nothing different from the ordinary world of Murim. It's just that the concept of power has changed radically along with the development and transformation of the modern world and its values. In the past, true strength meant martial arts, physical strength, and nobility of character in the traditional sense. However, today's power implies political influence and authority, and it took her only half a day to realize her powerless position. This short time was enough to understand the true state of affairs in the new world for her. To the students around her, she was a typical outsider who didn't fit into the established social hierarchy. In order to somehow survive in this hostile and alien environment, she had to be extremely careful. She lived as if she didn't exist at all, constantly observing the moods of those around her and adapting to them. Perhaps this is why, compared to other students, her sensitivity and ability to observe were significantly higher than average. Moreover, her intuition became incredibly good and accurate, allowing her to sense dangerous situations in advance. She patiently endured all the difficulties of school life, and her graduation day finally arrived solemnly. Thanks to hard and purposeful work, she was able to successfully enter a good and prestigious university. However, on that same day, an event occurred that radically changed her entire future life. A strange man approached her and politely asked if she really was Yusin. She met for the first time the leader of the Dark Division team in simple terms. the team that does the dirtiest work. This unit belonged to the weakest team number 7 in the overall hierarchy of the organization. Many will probably ask why a girl who had suffered so much agreed to do such a dangerous and questionable job. As the eldest daughter in the family, she felt a responsibility to help the family financially, but that wasn't really the case. It's just that this specific job paid very well, which was extremely important for her financial situation. For a simple girl from an ordinary family, getting such a high-paying opportunity was an incredible stroke of luck. Having spent her entire life digging through the trash and refuse of society, she became accustomed to hard and thankless work. Although even if she earns just a little more than usual, it won't change anything fundamentally in her life. But at least her younger brothers and sisters, she doesn't want them to live exactly the same way she lives. However, the work that the 7th team was doing aroused her genuine sympathy and was truly strange. Even small things like preserving life are critically important, but how morally acceptable is that? And yet, despite all the doubts and internal contradictions, she continued to work in the team. The monster they encountered was completely different from the usual opponents they had fought. The girl watched the main character closely at that critical moment, trying to understand his true intentions. The protagonist addressed her directly, singling her out from the general group of opponents as the most promising. He said that she is different from the rest of the team because she can read and analyze the situation correctly. The protagonist added that especially for her, he would generously give her the opportunity to make an informed choice. The first option was that she would immediately run away from here without looking back and never return. In this case, she will remain alive, but everyone else will be brutally torn to pieces and die by her hand. The second option was that she somehow kills him and thus saves everyone else's lives. The girl could not understand what he was talking about because how could she complete such an impossible task? The protagonist came even closer and persistently asked what she would finally choose since there was practically no time left. The girl had absolutely no idea what exactly this mysterious and dangerous guy expected from her in this situation. She quickly realized that she needed to stall for time by any means necessary in the hope that others would come and help them. The main character told her to stop uselessly racking her brains. Did she really think that someone would come and everything would change? After these words, the girl began to worry, very much realizing the hopelessness of her position in this critical situation. She realized with horror that the main character could clearly see and understand all her thoughts and plans. Moreover, he looks down on her, as if she were just an insignificant nuisance to him. The protagonist stood up tiredly and sighed heavily, demonstrating his disappointment in the events happening around him. He said with annoyance that the end is the end, adding that she turned out to be extremely boring and uninteresting. The girl could not understand what exactly he meant by the definition boring in this context. Gunshin sternly said that the girl should simply accept death and not resist his will any longer. The frightened girl began to desperately stop his movement, begging him to give her just one short moment to think. In a trembling voice, she asked to be allowed to think at least a little about what she should do. The threatening Gunshin slowly began to move his powerful hand towards the frightened girl, preparing to deliver the fatal blow. The danger increased as Gunshin was already very close to his defenseless victim, ready to kill. The desperate girl kept repeating all this precious time that she desperately needed time to think. The poor girl was naturally seized with the strongest fear of imminent death at his hands. Suddenly she gathered up the last of her courage and decisively declared that she was choosing the mysterious third option. Confused Gunshin couldn't figure out which third option she was talking about so strangely. With hands shaking with horror, she pointed at something, claiming the existence of a third option for solving the problem. Just a second ago he was on the verge of despair, as if an inescapable fate was chasing him and nothing could be changed. It was now clear that the mighty Gunshin had a serious problem that required immediate attention and solution. His previous judgments and assessment of the situation turned out to be absolutely correct and accurate in every respect. However, he unexpectedly turned out to be far from the unsurpassed master he had previously considered himself to be. It was precisely the fact that they missed this important moment that became the main reason for their crushing defeat. The worried girl began to carefully take out something very important from her hidden pockets or bag. She then timidly handed him an object, and Gunshin was extremely surprised to see this unexpected thing. In a trembling voice, she explained that these were special pills that she was given every month to increase her internal energy. The girl, hoping for salvation, carefully handed him these potentially life-saving pills, waiting for his reaction to the offer. Gunshin noticed that she had indeed accumulated quite a lot of these pills over the past time and months. Unfortunately, the prospects for using these pills looked rather dubious and disappointing for solving problems. From the outside, these tablets were clearly of low quality and completely unsuitable for him, although the girl was definitely not a weakling since he was not an unrivaled martial artist. The confused girl asked hesitantly if he was not considered an unrivaled master in his craft and art. Even with such worthless pills and with the help of internal energy, you can try to solve the problems that have arisen. If there is any problem, he still remains an unrivaled master of his craft. The desperate girl begged him to tell her what he wanted, and she would get it by any means necessary. Gunshin pondered the offer. He wondered if he should take those questionable pills now. Even in her own thoughts, this proposal sounded completely useless and devoid of any practical meaning. Indeed, these low-quality pills were unlikely to help with serious energy problems. How could such a simple girl find something so valuable and truly useful to him? She couldn't run away from here either, because that would have put the lives of other people at risk. If she tries to escape alone, her younger comrades will be left here in danger and without protection. Having decided to take a desperate step, the girl slowly began to reach for her combat weapon, preparing for battle. At this critical moment, she sadly recalled all the wonderful moments spent with her younger comrades. Deep down, she knew that all her actions were done to protect her younger friends. It was today, on this fateful day, that she had to show all her determination and courage. Right here, in this very place, the outcome of this entire dangerous and critical situation will be decided. The time has come for her to demonstrate her true courage and willingness to sacrifice herself for others. Today, she is ready to die like a true hero, protecting those who are dear to her heart and soul. Gathering her courage, the girl resolutely began to approach him, calling on Gunshin to begin an attack on her. Meanwhile, Gunshin calmly took the pills she offered, carefully studying their properties and the quality of the composition. Confused by what was happening, the girl asked in bewilderment what exactly he was doing with these pills now. Gunshin mockingly asked if she wasn't a genius, since he had completely forgotten about the obvious solution to the problem. The shocked girl looked at him with wide eyes in surprise, not understanding the changes that were taking place. Suddenly realizing the situation, Gunshin solemnly announced that there really was that third option to resolve the conflict. It turns out that there really was that mysterious third option that the frightened girl had spoken of earlier in despair. Surprised by his own forgetfulness, Gunshin wondered how he could have forgotten such an obvious solution to the current situation. A pleased Gunshin heartily congratulated the smart girl on her resourcefulness and told her to go take care of her younger comrades. There was no sign that the mighty Gunshin was deceiving her or telling her a lie. A relieved Gunshin grabbed the grateful girl's hand and said that he was going to go get something to eat after a long day. The grateful girl assured him that she would give him all the remaining pills so that he could take them with him. The worried girl began to timidly stop the departing Gunshin, not believing in such a simple solution to the conflict between them. The unperturbed Gunshin did not react to her words in any way and continued to calmly walk forward along the road. The distrustful girl asked doubtfully if he was really going to just up and leave. A confident Gunshin confirmed that he really intended to just leave her today. Finally, Gunshin warned the girl that if she followed him again, she would definitely die. The frightened girl was naturally frightened by such a serious and threatening warning from a powerful martial arts master. Grateful for the rescue, the girl immediately sincerely thanked the generous Gunshin for the mercy he had shown her. Finally, she wished him a good journey with all her heart and again respectfully called him an unsurpassed master. By this time, dark night had already descended upon the earth, enveloping everything around in thick shadows. Suddenly, Gunshin stopped abruptly in the middle of the road, feeling something strange about the surroundings and atmosphere. A wary Gunshin noticed something suspicious, but he didn't know where he should go now. It turned out that the girl had already returned home and Gunshin was still standing next to her home. Deep in thought, Gunshin was seriously thinking about something that was very important to him at the moment. The confused guy couldn't figure out if they really should go to this place now. The cautious girl noticed that it was already late, so they should behave quietly and not make noise. The worried girl asked where he had managed to get so dirty and ordered him to take his things to the laundry. After these words, they carefully began to enter the house, trying not to make unnecessary noise. The hurried girl began to urge the slow Gunshin, and he asked her to stop pushing and hurrying so much. Suddenly, one of the house's inhabitants came out to them, disrupting their plans to quietly enter. The frightened girl instantly realized that standing in front of them was her strict father, who had returned home earlier than usual. Acting quickly and decisively, she instantly pushed the confused guy into the nearest room, hiding his presence. The angry man furiously reproached his daughter for promising to return early but coming so late. The apologetic girl explained to her father that she was forced to study until late, so she had no choice. The suspicious man looked at his daughter carefully and sternly, trying to understand whether she was telling the truth. The worried girl began to worry a lot and did not understand whether her father would believe her this time. The relenting father said he had specially prepared some delicious braised ribs for his hard-working daughter. The smiling man suggested that they go eat before the prepared food completely cooled down and spoiled. Then the caring girl suggested that the boy also go and eat, but the father said that he would eat after the shower. The observant Gunshin didn't understand why these two people were acting so strangely and suspiciously now. The thinking guy noticed that their behavior looked really strange and unusual for ordinary people. The curious Gunshin couldn't figure out whether this room was meant for bathing or something else. Intrigued, Gunshin began to carefully touch the faucet, not understanding what it was or what it was for. When warm water suddenly poured on the surprised Gunshin, he did not understand what was happening to this device. After a while, the flow of water stopped and Gunshin was left standing in bewilderment at what had happened to him. Gradually realizing the situation, Gunshin realized that what happened was a completely normal occurrence in this world and house. The curious Gunshin began to look with interest at his reflection in the mirror surface in front of him. Then he carefully wiped the fogged glass and looked at his reflection again more closely. Gunshin, who was studying himself, seriously considered whether this reflection really belonged to him now in this reality. The surprised guy noticed with interest that his new body looked pretty good and attractive to others. Realizing the changes, he understood that he was now significantly different from his previous appearance and appearance completely. As he accepted the new reality, he realized the important truth that he was no longer the same Gunshin from his past life. The practical Gunshin turned his attention to the shower cabin, studying its structure and possibilities for use. The determined guy began to undress and said that first he needed to wash off all the dried blood. Looking at himself, he noticed with surprise that his current body was very thin and weak. Critically assessing the situation, Gunshin wondered whether this body really belonged to a real man or not. In his opinion, a real man must carefully train his body in order to be worthy of being called a strong man. Enjoying the treatments, Gunshin noted with pleasure that hot water is always ready for use instantly. Looking back, he noted that in his time followers had to boil water in cauldrons. It was only after some time that the relaxed Gunshin suddenly realized the awkward fact that he was standing completely naked. Confused, Gunshin asked himself in bewilderment what he was doing here in such an inappropriate state. The girl, taken by surprise, immediately began to scream loudly from surprise and embarrassment at the sight she saw. At that very moment, the main character instinctively and forcefully kicked the man who had suddenly appeared in the stomach. The defending hero loudly asked if the man was a thief who had entered the house with bad intentions. The injured man looked at the aggressively minded protagonist with pain and surprise after the unexpected blow. After the incident, the adult man politely asked the girl present to close her eyes and turn away from what was happening. The calmed-down protagonist sat quietly in the room, and in this calm moment reflected on what had happened. The focused hero was completely immersed in the important process of thinking over all the recent events and their consequences. Suddenly he had a severe headache and he could not understand the reason for this ailment. After the attack of pain, the tired protagonist slowly turned over and carefully lay down on the soft bed. The thoughtful guy was seriously thinking about something very important and significant for his future destiny in life. The tired protagonist just lay quietly on the bed and thought deeply about the current situation. The lying protagonist slowly raised his hand up, examining it carefully in the dim light of the room. Lost in his memories, he recalled his teacher's wise words about the mysterious demonic cult and its danger. He clearly remembered how that authoritative teacher had categorically asserted that such a cult did not exist at all. The protagonist, seriously considering the situation, thought deeply about this contradictory statement and its meaning. All this long time he thought intensively about this mysterious and contradictory information from the teacher. Suddenly, right in front of the lying hero, a mysterious system window unexpectedly appeared with important information for him. The system offered to complete a final mission, promising upon successful completion the opportunity to return at any desired point in time. The hero demanded that the system keep its promise to return, otherwise he guaranteed it painful destruction and suffering. Meanwhile, somewhere in the silence of the night, three mysterious figures were moving cautiously along the roofs of buildings. The group consisted of three experienced people, each of whom had special skills and abilities to perform. One of the group members curiously asked his comrades what exactly was happening in the area right now. It turned out that the mighty Lord Damro himself had personally summoned them all to carry out an important secret mission. The informed guy explained that all the phantom assassins in charge of the district had left their posts on orders. He asked with concern what this could mean, since it had been a long time since all the phantom killers had been collected. Someone from the group expressed bewilderment at such a serious and large-scale gathering of all the operatives at once. The group leader told everyone to shut up and focus on the upcoming important task from the higher-ups. The significant fact that they were all personally summoned by the Lord speaks to the critical importance of the upcoming task. After some time, all members of the group safely arrived at the designated secret meeting place. One of the girls was pleasantly surprised that they were personally met by the powerful Lord himself. The leader asked if everyone could hear him well, as there were some technical problems with the communication system. Fortunately, the connection worked fine, which was a great relief after long technical problems with the system. One of the participants mentally noted that the Lord looked very cute and charming that evening. The strict commander asked all participants in the operation to focus as much as possible on the upcoming important briefing and task. The Lord inquired about the team's well-being but preferred to get straight to the serious business without further ado. According to the Lord, the situation is not so critical but still requires a special intelligence operation. The action took place in a distant and mysterious country called Korea, full of ancient secrets. At this important moment, the Lord simply stood calmly on the high roof of the building, observing the surrounding area. In a serious tone, he began to report that clear traces of dangerous demonic arts had been discovered in Korea. Meanwhile, during the day, other important events and meetings took place in one of the city's high-rise buildings. Keen observers may have noticed the badge of Special Team 7 leader Young-ho. A businessman in a formal suit entered the elevator at this very important moment of the working day. A polite elevator girl greeted him and asked if he needed the 15th floor of the building for the meeting. After confirmation, the elevator safely delivered the serious man to the required 15th floor of the office building for an important meeting. As he exited the elevator, the worried man sighed heavily, preparing himself for the upcoming difficult conversation with management. He then began to carefully adjust his business suit, wanting to look presentable before an important meeting with his superiors. After tidying up his appearance, the man decisively knocked on the door of the manager's office. Having received permission, the prepared man cautiously entered the spacious office to report the incident. The manager, who was in the office, politely asked how he could help his subordinate in this situation. The excited team leader explained in detail that a serious accident had occurred with the participants during the mission. The indifferent manager coldly asked what was special about this ordinary incident and why it should concern him. Emphasizing his indifference, he repeated his question about what was special about this incident. Hearing such a reaction, the confused team leader naturally became confused after such a cold attitude of the management towards the tragedy. Gathering his courage, he explained that the injured student was a protege of the famous master Park Chanam. Upon hearing this name, the previously indifferent leader suddenly showed noticeable surprise and concern about the incident that had occurred. Continuing his report, the leader explained that yesterday, while disposing of a corpse, the team was discovered by a ghostly killer. As a result of an unexpected clash, Team 7 members Mason Yusung Songju and Jongkung got into a serious fight. Due to his injuries, Sungju needs 11 weeks to recover, Jongha needs 13 weeks, and Mahone has had his arm torn off. The manager, who understood the situation, agreed that these seriously injured guys could not continue active work. The experienced team leader was still very surprised by such unexpected and strange answers from the manager. He asked his boss directly what was happening to him today, why he was behaving so strangely. The perplexed subordinate inquired about the reasons for such unusual behavior of the manager in this critical situation with the team. It turned out that the seventh team did not have a leader he joined later, which violates corporate norms. The company has clear rules and regulations that must be followed by all employees without exception. The man who realized his mistake was naturally confused after such a fair remark from his superiors about the violations. If this serious violation is officially discussed, it will have a negative impact on both of them. The manager hinted that it would be better not to report anything to higher management about this incident and violations. He suggested that what happened be considered an ordinary accident and a surprising but explainable coincidence of circumstances and events. Therefore, it is in the interests of all involved that we do not draw unnecessary attention to this unfortunate incident. The management decided not to make a mountain out of a molehill and not to create unnecessary problems because of this unfortunate incident. This place has always been an institution where no one really cares about the fate of ordinary employees like them. From the company management's point of view, parts that have worn out or broken simply need to be replaced with new ones. At that moment, the superior manager began to address the confused subordinate with new instructions and orders. The boss started waving his hand and irritably asking why he was standing there and to go and do his job. The obedient man bowed respectfully to his leader and assured that he understood everything and would follow the instructions. After this, the obedient subordinate began to slowly and carefully leave the boss's office through the main entrance. The departing employee suddenly wanted to add something important to his report, but did not dare interrupt his boss. He wondered why the team disposed of the corpse without using the protective golden lock formation for safety. Hearing this question, Zhang So became even more surprised and concerned about the violation of standard security protocols. Building a golden castle is mandatory for all Ghost Squad members when performing dangerous operations. The golden castle creates an isolated space separated from reality using special talismans and mystical devices. Failure to use protective measures for participants in the Ghost Department is a gross violation of safety regulations. The manager explained that he asked about this solely out of professional curiosity about the details of the incident. The boss turned to his subordinate again, wanting to find out the reasons for his obvious concern and anxiety. The observant manager noticed that the man appeared extremely agitated and tense after reporting the incident. The concerned boss asked if there was anything else that he needed to know about immediately. Hearing this question, the confused man was unbearably surprised by such a display of attention from the management. From surprise and excitement, he completely lost the power of speech and could not utter a single word. Then the man, gathering his courage, tried to tell his boss that everything was fine, but his words got stuck. The manager reminded the leader that it was time to take a position on the sixth team, not command the seventh. The boss sarcastically asked if his modest salary was enough to pay for his children's education abroad, ironically noting that he himself has the same problems, although he has no children at all. The manager advised not to get stuck in one place but to actively move up the career ladder to achieve success. Unlike ordinary people without connections and influence, he has certain advantages in promotion. The chief emphasized that he came from a prestigious and influential family with good connections in society. The manager assured that this was just a statement of an objective fact, so there was no need to be offended by the truth. Therefore, in the current quarter, it is better to behave quietly and not draw unnecessary attention to problems. After listening to all the instructions, the subordinate male simply stood silently and thought about the words he had heard from his leader. Finally, collecting his thoughts, he respectfully assured his superior that he fully understood everything that had been said and would carry out the instructions. After finishing his unpleasant conversation with the management, he slowly walked out onto the spacious balcony to reflect and rest. In a state of stress, he smoked quite a few cigarettes in a row, trying to calm his shattered nerves from what had happened. The worried man took out an almost empty pack of cigarettes and looked at its contents with sadness. To his regret, there was only one last cigarette left in the crumpled pack from the entire supply. Having realized this unpleasant circumstance, the upset man was seriously puzzled by the current situation and the prospects for further action. Meanwhile, somewhere else, one of the injured team members was very surprised by what was happening. The guy who came to his senses had difficulty understanding where exactly he was at that moment after losing consciousness. The confused young man could not understand what had happened to him and the team yesterday. Looking around, he noticed with relief that their mutual friend was next to him. Concerned about his comrade's condition, he took a close look at his teammate's seriously injured leg. Grabbing his injured limb, he anxiously asked Yusun what had happened to them. The worried guy begged the girl to immediately call for help and contact the medical team right now. The desperate comrade insistently asked her to do this as soon as possible without wasting precious time on delay. He asked her excitedly what she was doing and that she should hurry up and call for help immediately. The bewildered guy demanded an explanation of what had happened to their team during the operation. The serious girl began to approach the confused team leader with an important request for secrecy. She insisted that, for everyone's safety, they had to keep their mouths shut about the student. The surprised leader began to ask the girl with disbelief whether she was really saying this completely seriously. If someone else had said such words, he would have scolded him for all this nonsense. The main reason he chose her for the team was her unerring feminine intuition. Only she could effectively protect the entire team from hidden dangers and unforeseen circumstances during operations. He had been absolutely confident in the correctness of this decision and her abilities for a long time. The worried leader then asked anxiously if their injured boys were still breathing after their serious injuries. The girl who examined her comrades replied that their condition was indeed bad, but they were still alive. First, they must take care of the wounded. He will take them to a healer he knows, then they will discuss the rest. By that time, it was already dark outside, shrouding everything around in thick shadows. The worried team leader again persistently asked the girl about what exactly happened to them yesterday. However, the silent girl did not answer anything. It was his fault for his frivolous attitude. In his own opinion, he was a completely lousy leader, unable to protect his team from danger. Naturally, these heavy thoughts of failure continued to torment his conscience and soul constantly. Then the thoughtful man slowly looked at the thoughtful girl next to him. The concentrated girl was thinking deeply about something very important to her in exactly the same way. After some hesitation, the caring leader literally pulled out some beautifully wrapped gift from his things. The embarrassed man carefully handed the gift to the girl and heartily congratulated her on her upcoming birthday. At this touching moment, a lonely man somewhere else was thoughtfully smoking aromatic cigarettes. Then the sad smoker took out of his pocket some old yellowed photograph of people dear to him. Thinking philosophically, he thought that it was indeed better to stay alive in any circumstances and conditions. Even if you have to wallow in life's dog shit, you would like to continue to believe in a better future. Then, in the silence of the night, the lonely man thought deeply about the meaning of his existence. In the dark alley, a large pool of dark blood could be clearly seen on the cold asphalt. In this ominous pool of dried blood lay carelessly a photograph of some unfamiliar middle-aged man. Meanwhile, the pensive protagonist was alone on the high roof of a multi-story building in the city. Deep in thought, he was seriously thinking about something of utmost importance for his future. The puzzled hero could not understand why the percentage of task completion had risen so sharply. Yesterday it had been lower. While he was pondering this riddle, his wise mentor and teacher suddenly entered the room. The worried teacher asked if the boy had gotten home safely yesterday after his martial arts classes. Yesterday, the main character asked in bewilderment why the teacher took so long to come when he called him. The surprised teacher asked again what he meant by long. He came right after the end of the lesson today. The main character, who began to remember the previous night, cautiously asked the mentor what he needed from him now. The attentive man asked with concern if something serious had happened to his student last night. The evasive Gunshin cautiously replied that what happened yesterday was not at all what the teacher thought. Instead of explaining what happened, he would rather ask his mentor one important question concerning safety in the city. An inquisitive student asked if there were dangerous murderers and criminals of all kinds in these parts. An experienced man confirmed that of course they do happen, which is why there are special people who deal with them. The mysterious people that the main character met last night are called ghostly shadows or killers by the locals. Intrigued, the protagonist asked if they were some kind of correctional troops or security police. The confirming teacher replied that this was approximately true, but why would a student be interested in such dangerous things? The suspicious mentor told the student to wait. The bastard definitely had something serious happen to him yesterday. The worried teacher demanded an explanation of what was going on with his strangely behaving student lately. Called to frankness, the teacher demanded that Gunshin tell the truth now without hiding important details. Distracted Gunshin looked thoughtfully at the mysterious scroll containing information about the completion of his secret mission. Then he focused on something very important, trying to understand the meaning of the changes he saw in the system. He was surprised to notice that his current progress was already 80% of the total task. Then the focused hero began to recall the details of yesterday's fierce battle with the ghostly killers and its consequences. After recalling his memories, he looked closely at the scroll again, confirming that the percentage was indeed 80. Analyzing the situation, Gunshin remembered in detail how exactly he fought against experienced opponents in the darkness yesterday. Then suddenly an important thought came to the pondering hero: that yesterday's opponents were special. It was becoming obvious that what had happened yesterday was somehow closely connected to the fulfillment of his main mission. If you think about the situation seriously, there is something much more significant and dangerous going on around him. Perhaps someone had skillfully hidden from his heightened sense of energy using advanced camouflage and concealment techniques. Realizing the importance of the moment, an excited Gunshin suddenly jumped up from his seat, preparing for possible danger and confrontation. Such a development of events seemed simply impossible to him, given his experience and mastery in martial arts. If this was truly the pinnacle of demonic arts, then he must find this opponent at any cost. At that critical moment, the wary Gunshin noticed that someone was indeed nearby under reliable cover. The experienced warrior knew very well who else in the area could have such abilities for stealth and camouflage. Gunshin, who had discovered him with obvious interest and appraising eyes. Analyzing the situation, Gunshin couldn't figure out whether this person was one of those who attacked. The teacher, who was watching what was happening, was very surprised and could not understand what strange thing was happening. At this tense time, the worried girl was hurriedly walking somewhere on her urgent business and duties. There were already 13 missed calls from the commander on her mobile phone, causing her serious concern. The worried girl cannot get through to the commander. She is worried and asks him to contact her at the first opportunity. After reading the messages, the worried girl took a deep, heavy breath, trying to calm her frayed nerves from her worries. Gathering her courage, the worried girl carefully reached out to open the heavy door of her house or apartment. Unexpectedly for her, the beeping of the phone stopped, interrupting her movement towards the door halfway. The message was sent by the team leader apologizing for the late hour. He would write to her in more detail after work. Having received the long-awaited answer, she once again sighed heavily with relief and was sincerely glad to hear from him. The happy girl thought that it was good that she hadn't written to him right away. What a great relief it was. The calmed-down girl continued to slowly stretch to finally open the front doors to her home after work. She suddenly remembered how the team leader had recently said that she rarely wrote or called him. At that critical moment, the thinking girl had an alarming realization of something very important and dangerous. Then she immediately grabbed her mobile phone and began hastily dialing the number of someone she knew. To her horror, she clearly heard the man's phone ringing and playing right outside the door. Realizing the danger of the situation, the frightened girl immediately began to worry greatly about her safety and life. Trying to remain calm, she immediately began to loudly call for help from her younger comrades and friends. Her cries for help were answered and quickly met by worried Uju and Chusun from the neighboring rooms. They began to talk in surprise that she had returned home so early, asking if she was okay. The girl, pretending to be calm, replied that her friend from work had come to visit and brought some goodies. The caring girl suggested to the younger ones that they go to their brothers to get some frozen food from the store. She asked them to take their time, play in the yard, and look after the youngest children at home. The frightened girl looked with alarm at the stranger who had suddenly appeared in their previously safe home. With a trembling voice, she asked the uninvited guest who he was and how he knew about this secret place. Although his face was not very visible in the dim light, the presence of this man was felt. The stranger emanated an ominous and threatening fighting spirit, foreshadowing great danger for all present. Naturally, she understood perfectly well that the situation was extremely dangerous for her and her younger comrades. Realizing the threat, the frightened girl immediately began to carefully reach for her combat weapon for self-defense. Then she instantly realized that she needed to escape from there immediately, and she began to flee from danger. All other considerations and plans faded into the background in the face of an immediate threat to life. The panic-stricken girl ran with all her might, not looking back at her pursuer or the danger. She couldn't understand if the dark department had already sent someone here because of yesterday's incident. Could it be that her lie was exposed, and that's why the leader sent her that weird apology message? Suddenly, a powerful golden chain formation began to form around her, restricting her movements and ability to escape. At this critical moment, a powerful energy explosion began to occur in the air, shaking everything around. Some huge glowing energy ball began to rapidly fill the entire surrounding space around her completely. She realized with surprise that it was a golden chain formation, but there were definitely no talismans nearby. The lack of visible mystical devices and talismans meant only one very disturbing thing for her. This only meant that the powerful formation was activated by someone directly without the use of auxiliary means. The man who appeared began to calmly say that he hoped that they could have a calm and friendly conversation. But unfortunately, it seemed that the girl was in too much of a hurry to leave here. The polite stranger said he would like to talk for a while and apologized for not introducing himself. Introducing himself, he said that he worked in the elite third team of the dangerous and secret dark branch of the organization. The man introduced himself as the team leader Seo Juho and politely said he was glad to meet them. The shocked girl was extremely surprised that it was the leader of the third team who came to deal with the seventh. As she now understands, until he personally dispels the energy chains of construction, no one will be able to. No one will be able to enter or exit this area while the powerful spell is in effect. Therefore, a serious man would like to thoroughly discuss with her all the details of the incident with the teams that happened yesterday. According to official documents, his younger brother lost his arm and his mind, leaving him crippled for life. Hearing these words, the shocked girl was extremely surprised that the victim was his younger brother. She simply couldn't believe such a tragic coincidence and connection between them in this situation. Then the angry man suddenly and cruelly plunged a sharp knife right into her defenseless leg. From the unbearable pain and the unexpectedness of the attack, the frightened girl immediately began to scream loudly in agony. After inflicting the wound, the ruthless man slowly pulled his hand along with the bloody knife away from the victim. The threatening man said coldly that in a dark department such behavior could not hide what had happened. Overwhelmed by pain and fear, the girl simply began to cry bitterly from hopelessness and physical suffering. The hurried interrogator informed the captive that he had very little time to obtain the information he needed. He asked impatiently what exactly had happened to his little brother on that fateful day of the operation. At this tense moment, someone suddenly said that he had finally found the one he was looking for. It turned out to be Gunshin, who stated that he had already spent the whole day looking for this man. Everyone present was very surprised when they suddenly saw him appear at a critical moment. At that moment, the guy calmly told the pursuer that he would now go with him to find out. The man sarcastically asked if Gunshin would now be so kind as to let him go to continue interrogating the girl. Surprised, Gunshin noted with interest that this was a formation of a golden chain with 8 powerful energy chains. Hearing such knowledge, the experienced man was very surprised by the enemy's level of understanding in the mystical arts. An impressed Gunshin said it was amazing how someone could use it so easily and naturally. The formation of the golden chain right here cannot be felt even by a true high-level martial artist. This is one of the main reasons why even the powerful Mr. Damro cannot catch it. Such a young brat can't so easily find and destroy such a powerful construction of an experienced master. The watching man was extremely surprised when the mighty formation suddenly began to rapidly collapse under the enemy's impact. He simply couldn't believe that a stranger could find and destroy his defenses so easily. Still shocked by what was happening, he remained very much surprised by the abilities of the young opponent in front of him. Moreover, the amazing Gunshin also easily breaks through this powerful energy barrier without any visible effort. The philosophizing Gunshin noted that people who behave perfectly in public always turn out to be the dirtiest. After these words, he effortlessly completely broke the energy barrier, freeing the space from restrictions. The freed Gunshin suggested that the frightened girl immediately leave this dangerous place with him for safety. The determined hero headed up to the floor above to continue sorting things out with the enemy in more suitable conditions. The confused girl wondered who this mysterious guy was and asked Gunshin to save her from danger. It was at this critical moment that all the other participants in this complex and dangerous game appeared on the scene. The girl, surprised by her release, asked her savior in bewilderment how he had managed to get here through the barrier. Confident Gunshin said that they would not go anywhere because he had serious questions for her. The girl, suffering from pain, began screaming about her injured leg and asking him to wait a little. Then the attentive Gunshin turned his attention to her bloody and seriously injured leg from the blow. He coldly told the girl to stop pretending because no one would die from a wound like that. At that moment, the enraged man roughly grabbed her hand, demanding an immediate explanation of what was happening. The aggressive interrogator demanded to know how exactly they had gotten there through his protection. Just don't let them tell him that they were inside the formation from the very beginning of its activation. He carefully checked the entire area before activation, and there was definitely no one nearby beforehand. At that moment, the puzzled man let go of her hand as an important thought came to him. The thoughtful enemy simply began to silently watch them, attentively analyzing the situation and the possibilities of action. The man who stood up to his full height and said with a serious expression that he was speaking perfectly. There was so much threatening energy and danger emanating from this mysterious man that it made one feel uneasy. The irritated protagonist said that the enemy was mumbling some nonsense incessantly. He asked the stranger directly who he was and what he wanted from them here. The self-confident man said that apparently he also had something to do with the girl, but he was the first. The threatening opponent then quickly pointed his sharp weapon directly at the protagonist's throat to intimidate him. Therefore, he politely asked the hero to be kind and not interfere with him while interrogating the captive. The unperturbed protagonist, without any visible emotion, calmly looked at the man with a gun threatening him. All the witnesses present immediately began to become very nervous at this critical and tense moment of the confrontation. The calm protagonist noted without emotion that the aggressive man was indeed the one who started this confrontation. The man, pleased with the situation, looked at the unperturbed guy with a smug smile, assessing his reaction to the threat. The satisfied opponent said that in that case they could continue their interesting conversation in a calm atmosphere. Returning to the interrogation, he looked closely at the frightened girl and demanded answers to his questions. The impatient man wanted to know what exactly happened to his little brother during surgery yesterday. The girl sadly remembered how she gave her precious pills to the main character for help. The official report that the management received from the team leader was incorrect and did not reflect the true events. She really felt sorry for what had happened, but she couldn't change anything in the circumstances. Moreover, she has absolutely nothing concrete to say about the victim Mahone and his injuries. Yesterday, Team 7 was suddenly attacked by an unknown high-level enemy. Faced with a powerful enemy, all team members were defeated and found themselves in serious danger of their lives. As for the identity of the mysterious adversary and his motives, there was practically no information about this. The mysterious enemy was wearing a mask, so they were unable to determine his identity and origin exactly. The experienced man asked her if she knew what the team leader had taught him on his first day on the job. The confused girl curiously asked the interrogator what exactly they could have taught her at the very beginning. At that moment, the enraged man suddenly and strongly hit her in the stomach, causing additional pain to the victim. Of course, it was unbearably painful for the girl. He said that one must always be on guard. The most important rule of survival is that you can trust no one at all in this dangerous profession. Even if the person standing in front of you is someone you have known for a very long time and consider reliable. This rule applies even if it is your trusted and loyal teammate on dangerous operations. If she is already determined to lie to him and hide the truth, then she must learn to do it. Let her at least learn to properly control her breathing while lying and hiding facts. The beaten girl was confused and very frightened by the cruelty and aggression on the part of the interrogator, because if she continues to tremble so much with fear, she will give herself away completely. At that tense moment, the man suddenly felt some unknown force coming from somewhere outside and could not understand the nature of this strange phenomenon. After a moment of reflection, he finally realized that this threatening energy definitely did not come from the people around him. His mind was feverishly trying to comprehend what this unbearably oppressive and frightening presence was that was literally squeezing the space around him. The next moment, the martial arts teacher slowly and menacingly began to approach him, emitting a dangerous aura of mastery. The only thing he could think about in those critical seconds was how not to make another fatal mistake. The man began to talk with bitterness in his voice about how after he left Jianam forever he swore to himself 1,000,000 times. When his attention was distracted by the girl who appeared, he completely failed to sense the approach of the dangerous energy of this powerful enemy at the most inopportune moment. He then made a sacred vow to himself never again, no matter what the circumstances, to get involved in the brutal world of martial arts. Master Gunshin listened attentively and focused to every word of his confession without interrupting or showing any emotion on his stern face. Moreover, he swore that he would not even come close to the representatives of this dangerous world, let alone directly confront them. Now all the details came together to form a single picture, and it became absolutely clear that he was the culprit of all these events. This mysterious opponent somehow broke through the defensive formation of the golden chain, which was considered virtually impregnable among martial artists. Without wasting a second, the man quickly grabbed the girl's weapon and said with determination in his voice that he would temporarily borrow it. The girl was genuinely surprised by the fact that he also ended up here in this dangerous place in the midst of the conflict. With contempt in his voice, the man stated that this particular opponent would never stop causing trouble and creating problems for the people around him. When she saw his fighting stance and the way he held his weapon, the girl immediately recognized him as the former best swordsman of Jeonnam. With undisguised anger in her voice, the girl resolutely declared that this impudent fellow must be properly taught a lesson for his impudent actions. At this critical moment in the confrontation, one could clearly hear mocking cries about how Park Jong-nam was just a worthless brat.